Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Tick it off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
Good evening. It's a sombre day for teachers, and today has been a day of reflection and a day of remembrance as we remember Caversham Primary's late head teacher, Ruth Perry, who sadly took her own life. And we learned today that this was in part due to an Ofsted inspection carried out at her school. We've heard the coroner's report today, and for the next 90 minutes, we're going to take a rather sombre look at what that report contains. And to lead that conversation, we have Brent Poland, and he's going to be joined by Adam Spence as well. Brent, the show is yours.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you for that opening. It's it's a tough one to lead into. I suppose we'll start with our sponsor, John Catt Educational, good bookstore for all teachers, and obviously just looking through some of their titles. There's plenty of stuff on there for teacher welfare and well-being, and I think that's where I would sort of start, is that we need to support each other. We do very well within teaching, support each other, but obviously we are living in a very stressful, high impactful, and sometimes downright frustrating profession, and especially the last couple of years with what we've been through. I was listening also to the COVID inquiry today. Today was one of those very busy days, wasn't it? And of course Benjamin, the passing of Benjamin Jeffariah, which is an absolute legend of poetry, actor, and an absolute Renaissance man in many ways. So it's been one of those days where you keep checking the news and something else seems to crop up. So it's a very busy day in a sense, and obviously the teachers we'll focus on obviously the Ruth Perry Inquest. We have guests coming on. We have with myself obviously and Adam. We'll have some of our Teacher Talk Radio stables as well. We've got the guys from Caversham, the organisers of the school group. They're coming on at 7:50. Is it, Tom?
Yeah, I believe so. Edmund Barnett Ward is on Sky News at the moment, I think, and Ben will be joining us later on in about 20-25 minutes' time.
Yeah, and Edmund has been absolutely invaluable in keeping pretty much most of the educational Twitter sphere up to date on what's been coming out of the inquest, and has been at the centre of obviously the community and representing Caversham as well. So it'd be really, I think we're quite privileged to be able to get him on. So thanks for the guys at TT Radio for helping to arrange that. I'd like to hear as much as possible from as many individuals and as many voices as possible. We've all, those of us who've been in education long enough, have stories of what Ofsted's been like. We know that we've been, many of us have been campaigning since last year, I know, like Tom Rogers was criticised by some individuals for, oh, let's go away. Why are you making a lot of this? And I know Amanda Spielman herself did turn around, and didn't she? And she's like, people have been using this situation to sort of criticise Ofsted. Well, I think all of us who have been calling for change, all of us who have been calling for, some fundamental changes in Ofsted seem to be vindicated with this. And it's not it's not that it should have taken the life of one of our own, and the life of an absolutely fantastic head teacher. It's really, that's the tragedy of this, is that it shouldn't have got this far. But we'll dissect and we'll go through the reactions from political leaders as well. We've got a couple of quotes from Spielman. Ofsted itself, we'll have, I think, need a general discussion of what's the future, what will change, how can we, because that's the thing, we need some solutions. We need to propose some solutions. We have a general election coming up in potentially next year, and how do we get this higher up the political agenda? Because even on a day like today, this has made top news, but it's not the top news story, and it's hard when you are fighting against. You can see the news cycle being dominated by certain culture war stories. We have a crisis in education. There is no hiding this. We've had it for quite some time, and that doesn't get resolved unless we can get some political will and some individuals who are decision makers to start making decisions. So I'd like to know, from our listeners and from anybody there who's got ideas, what do we replace Ofsted with? It's all right saying, not Ofsted, but what else can we do? What can we do in the interim as well? Do we do what Flora did? Do we say, right, that's it? Do we just refuse to work with Ofsted? There's a lot of anger out there, and I don't want to be the guy that states that anger, in a sense, because I'm prone to bouts of kind of anger myself, and I do have, like many of us, a seething feeling of, I'm fuming, of course, like many of us, but I don't want to take that out on individuals, or equally make it personal to individuals. It's about how do we make this change, and how can we make this change. So we are sponsored by John Cat Education. You'll find them at johncatbookshop.co.uk. I think over Christmas be a good chance to catch up on any of their books that are, especially as regards mental health, because there's not just the tragedy of a person, who's died, but taking their own life as well is a horrible thing. And I would say, and I'll say this to start with, if anybody is feeling that they need to have conversations, please talk. Please talk to other people. Please let other people know. Please feel free to even drop us a line as well, because we are dealing with something that is, too often, it is a horrible experience. It's touched me in my own life with people I've known have taken their own lives. It's a really difficult thing to deal with, and obviously want to be sensitive to that as well. And it's quite clear that the coroner's report has made that link, that the Ofsted inspection is the causal link to sadly Ruth taking her own life. And it is something that they're going to have to deal with. It is something that educationists are going to have to try to, I suppose, come to terms with, that people out there, not just Ruth, have been pushed over the edge within our profession. And I mean, not just from the point of view of taking their own life, but also the amount of people who have had mental health breakdowns. We are one of the highest impacts when it comes to stress. But this issue is quite clear that this could have been preventable, that this didn't need to happen. And in a week as well, it's been one of those weeks when you've looked and you've seen the COVID inquiry. We've seen the Hillsborough law not being handed in. We're still waiting for any sort of Grenfell thing. I just often think you get the lessons are learned mantra, and you get the sense that the guys in charge wish this to go under the carpet, don't they? They sort of want these type of things when they come out to be brushed under the carpet, and sort of like the news cycle to move on, and then the attention to be drawn away from it. And I think we here as Teachers Talk Radio, and we here as teachers going to discuss this, are obviously going to talk about what the next steps can be. I've reached out to the leadership of my union, the NEU, and I will reach out to Daniel Kebity. I'll wait for a response. It is last minute when I contacted him. He will respond. He has responded on X, and they have said, quote unquote, Daniel has just to give you a quote what Daniel has said, and that he has, along with others, have called for fundamental change in Ofsted. And that does seem to be the call from many. I mean, it's interesting, Gillian Keegan. She says we will look at the coroner's recommendations to consider further changes to make sure we have an inspection system that supports schools and teachers and ultimately secure Ruth's legacy. Nice words, but I don't see any sort of concrete anything. We will look closely at the coroner's recommendations to consider further changes. I'd say what further changes have been made since Ruth's passing. I don't think there have been further changes, and we have an inspection system that supports schools and teachers and ultimately secures Ruth's legacy. I would agree that we need something that supports schools rather than criticises schools. So that's Gillian Keegan. Rosie Duffield is an MP in Kent and has said, it's so sad, it's just so wrong. Head teachers I know across Kent have often talked about the immense pressure and stress their team are put through to obtain a single word score, which is supposed to sum up everything about their school. So it is good to see politicians actually, quoting about this and paying attention to this. However, what are they going to do? That's the question. When I look at the largest political parties, they don't seem to have a huge amount of reform. They don't seem to have massive amount of form of Ofsted. It seems to be business as usual, doesn't it? And again, it's what is needed. What would we as teachers accept? We need some sort of, obviously, well, we need some sort of quality assurance, don't we? We don't want to be marking our own homework. It's not as if we're currently in government. They need to mark their own homework. But certainly we don't want to be in that situation. And that's something that we'd welcome, constructive criticism, but not what Ofsted is currently. Paul Whiteman has been quoted a lot to the media today from the NAHT. The verdict is clear, he says. It's a damning indictment of an approach to inspection that's done massive harm to school professionals. Ofsted has no choice but to seriously reflect and make changes to ensure a tragedy like this happens again. Again, we have another stakeholder saying we need to make changes. The tragedy never happens again. Lessons must be learned. But yet, maybe in a couple of days, we'll start to see some sort of outcome. But at the moment, it seems to be, yes, changes need to be made. There's a line drawn in the sand that enough's enough. But the question is what? Edmund, who's coming on later.
I've brought in Brian Lightman, who is the former General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening, Edmund.
Hello, pleased to be here.
You're all right. What's your reaction then, my friend?
Well, I mean, I'm really pleased to see this report. And, obviously, I wish it hadn't been necessary to go through that process in such tragic circumstances. But I think what we've seen today, I think the word vindicated was used a few minutes ago. It really highlights the issues that so many people have been saying. And we know that change is necessary. And I think your point that you've made about actually what those changes should be is a really key one. I mean, I go back a long way in the world of inspection, and I'm speaking in a personal capacity here. Obviously, I'm not, no longer General Secretary of ASCL, but I know they're saying sort of things as well about this. We need change, and I say that as somebody who recognises the importance of some sort of scrutiny of schools, of accountability. We get that. There are billions of pounds spent on education, and it's right that we are accountable, but not in the way that it's being done at the moment. And I think the key thing here is actually how it's done. Now, part of my own personal experience was as a head teacher in Wales, where I worked, where we were inspected by Estyn, and I actually trained as an Estyn inspector. And that's the Welsh inspection system for those who aren't acquainted with it. And it has a completely different culture. The culture there was we are there to try and support schools in their striving to improve further. And that has to be the culture that comes in. And it's absolutely not the culture of Ofsted. When I trained as an inspector in Wales, and it was the most rigorous training I've ever been through, you were then accredited as an Ofsted inspector. And we had to go to a mandatory training session on, I think it was on inclusion at the time. And the impact that had on me was I immediately resigned from Ofsted. I refused to do any inspection for them because it was about catching people out. And that is sadly the culture that we now see. Now, there was a period when HMIs were highly respected experts, and and one of the things we need to get back to is where we have experts like that looking at the system and indeed looking at policy without fear or favour as they were supposed to, and highlighting what the key things are there. And in terms,
do you think the fear culture is what sort of this big brother is watching, this Orwellian sort of organization, and we can't be trusted, we have to bring in these guys who are going to sort us out? Is that kind of hostile, aggressive, we will show them what to do, we will model it, and you will follow our instructions, almost authoritarian when you think about it, isn't it? It's an organization that's gone very, very dark, isn't it? Into the point where
it has.
You're literally
it has. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be like that. And sometimes it isn't. I've heard of 2 examples recently where inspections were quite positive experiences because the lead inspector behaved in a professional way and worked with the school. And the key thing here is, I mean, I've had the privilege over the last 5-6 years since I've been freelance of working with hundreds of schools, and they all want to improve further. There's no question about that. And what they need is an inspection system that validates their self-evaluation, because they know what the issues are. And what we want to have is a culture where leaders of a school can say, look, this is where we are, this is what we think we need to do. You're people who've seen loads and loads of other places across the country. Do you have any, do you see what we're doing? Is there anything we're doing wrong or we could learn from someone else, and bring in those sorts of experience? And that is a much more constructive approach. And of course, everybody said we need to get away from these ridiculous grades because they're meaningless. And the data, I go into hundreds of lessons. I would never dream of making a judgment on the basis of a 10-minute visit into lessons or a so-called deep dive that is carried out by a non-specialist, talking to somebody in that sort of conversation. It's just not valid. It's not reliable. And what we need is reliable data.
3 things then, Fran. If you had 3 things then, if you were making the recommendations and you'd say, right, I'm talking to government and I'm going to talk to potentially the new government coming in, who would want to keep elements of it. They'd want to keep the accountability, which we'd agree. They'd want to keep the idea that, you are spending billions. That's a fair point. We're a public service, therefore there has to be some accountability to the parents as well. So we need some way to communicate with parents. We need some way to measure performance that doesn't sort of discriminate against schools, which is levels the playing field a little bit, which allows contexts of schools to be taken into consideration, because that's not fair that sometimes comparisons are made. So you need to have some way of leveling that that's done in a way that you can then, almost like when you look at a house and you rag rate it, when you buy a new house and you have the assessor comes in and says, here's the things you need to fix, here's the things that you can fix later on, and here's the things that are desirable. So you have that kind of maybe like a rag rating things of these are the essentials to get onto that, and then we'll come back to you. So what 3 things then, if you had 3 things you could do and you could recommendations, what would the sort of recommendations then be to fix and reform Ofsted to ensure that something like Ruth's death doesn't happen then?
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, can I do an overarching one, first of all, and just say that it is the culture that's got to change, and whether that's still called Ofsted or what it is, I don't care, but the culture has to change, and the behaviour of people and all those. But the key things if you wanted 3 things there, I would say the first thing is that the inspection needs to move to a validation of the schools or the academies or the trusts' self-evaluation, that they are the people who are leading their organisations, and we should expect our school leaders and our trust leaders to be working hard to improve further. We know they are. So can we validate that? That's the first thing. Second thing is that I think the surveys are really important, that we have a body who are looking at the education system as a whole, about how the policy is working objectively, so that it's not a political thing, a party political thing. It's about, is this policy, what's the impact this policy is happening? And I think the third thing then would be the nature of the reporting, is that it has to be narrative. I think it has to go away from these grades that are so damaging, and they're meaningless. They don't tell the true story. We know that. I've seen it hundreds of times.
Yeah. I suppose one of the problems is there's almost an industry being created out of Ofsted.
Of course, yeah.
We've got all these advisors coming in, ex-Ed teachers. A lot of people make a lot of money out of it. And I suppose my bugbear, and this is the thing that's always upset me, is that I have a local school that's very much like Caversham, and I literally, my wife's the head governor of it. We support the head teacher recently through an Ofsted, and at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what has happened to there can happen to mine. If it was touched in any way whatsoever by any other organisation, I'd be outside chaining myself to the gates to say, I want to keep that under local authority control. So the question is, has there been some sort of dirty tricks of undermining schools in order to force schools out of local authority? In other words, has Ofsted been politicised and used as an attack dog, as a way of just basically, by the back door, forcing schools to become academies? And was this situation part of what was actually happening here as well, of a way just to undermine the school, to clear out individuals and move it? I don't like the feeling of this, but it does come across in what the coroner's report was suggesting, that one of Ruth's real concerns was that if the school was to be academised, that the SLT and that her immediate sort of staff around her would also lose their jobs, and she would be ultimately responsible. And reading through her notes, oh my gosh, they're heartbreaking. And that's literally the fear that was prevailing through her, that she was responsible, she had failed, she had let down. And those notes they're on the BBC website. They're harrowing. They're absolutely harrowing. They're really hard to read. But that's what head teachers go through. They feel the brunt of it. They feel the pain of it. They feel responsible, and they literally did that to her. What do you think? Do you think that has been the case, that there has been that political motivation of undermining schools to force them into academisation?
Well, I think there are two things you said there. The first thing is that I have seen hundreds of head teachers literally losing their jobs on the back of Ofsted in judgments. And that is completely wrong, because it's not just the head, and it may be something like in Caversham, which was one issue that could be resolved very, very quickly, So I think that's a massive issue here. That shouldn't be the case. In terms of academisation, I don't know, but what I do know is that Ofsted certainly has become very much the vehicle of government policy, and I think probably the strongest example I can think of that is the fact that they have to go and look and see that schools are implementing the EBAC, and they won't grade them outstanding. If they aren't pushing the EBAC for all students, even if that is not what the school leaders feel is appropriate for the students. And there was a period certainly in the early coalition years where ministers, secretaries of state wanted all schools to become academies, and certainly there was a lot of pressure there. And obviously the RI judgment, which I opposed at the time very strongly, the idea of writing on a report, this is not a good school, that certainly had an impact.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brad. I want to try to see if we can get some more speakers in. I've had Flora on as well. I don't know if Flora wants to come in and speak.
Can I just say, I'm going to have to
I've
leave
given
soon.
you Paula King, who is an English teacher and subject leader for performing arts in the Northwest, and she's connected she was connected as a speaker. She's now gone.
Brilliant. So thank you, Brian. I think that's very insightful. I think I agree completely with the culture thing. That culture of hostility, aggression. But even I tell you what it does is that when you're sitting there in your first meeting of the year, you're ready fresh to go in your new year school, and you're like, great, here's my class list, here's all the rest of it, and you sit through the last year's data, and then you're just waiting for the first reference to, if Ofsted come in, they're going to inspect your books, and your just heart sinks. And then you get the whole list of like, Ofsted are looking for this, we must do this to satisfy the needs of. And then your just heart sinks, doesn't it? And you sort of realize, why am I in education? To satisfy the needs of an organization that's maybe or maybe not going to come in and look at my lessons. And I agree with Brian completely in the sense that I was inspected in 2010 on a subject specific Ofsted with citizenship. I had the lead HMI inspector for citizenship for the whole country. And it was actually an uplifting experience. She praised what was good about my program of study. She was very honest, and the criticism was extremely fair. I took it as a list of things to improve. I walked away from it feeling vindicated and elated, actually, after my Ofsted inspection. But that was 2010. And it has definitely changed a lot since then. And that's what I would like to see it returning to, an organisation that comes in and helps you, evaluates fairly, and evaluates your evaluation yourself. And that was the thing that was really important, is that the lead inspector at that stage was asking me, you've recorded yourself at this grade, why have you done that? It's those conversations of, the local setting. For instance, they looked and says, well, you can't say that you're outstanding on community cohesion when you don't have a percentage of ethnic diversity. And I'm looking at this lead inspector going, hello, have you listened to my accent? Do you not think I'm diverse? And it's because it was a Catholic school, she looked at just the ethnicity, and I was, well, we've got a lot of Polish, a lot of Irish, a lot of people that you wouldn't think are diverse, but it is. And it's that context that I could give her that she then says, oh, I respect your judgment. And that's the old inspections that we used to get, where you didn't have that kind of fear culture of they're out to get you. And I think you're absolutely right, Brian. It is that fear of Ofsted, they're out to get you, don't let it. And I've had staff who felt that I don't want to be the one that lets the school down.
Brent,
I don't want to be the one that lets the community down.
Brent,
So,
sorry,
yes, we've got
we've got Mrs. H ready to come on.
Fantastic.
So, hello, Mrs. H.
I think it's Miss H.
Oh,
Miss H,
sorry.
if you can unmute yourself, please, in the bottom left-hand side of your device, and then we'll be able to hear you, Miss H.
Good evening.
Miss H is an ITT mentor and a deputy designated safeguarding lead. So, well, Miss H, unmute herself. Adam, anything you wanted to add tonight?
Well, I'm sat here just like listening to all the comments. I'm so heartbroken by this story, and I think kind of one of the things that really upsets me is the things that have come out, particularly about the inspector that was mocking and unpleasant in the meeting on the first day. I think that's kind of a particularly kind of cruel experience altogether. And like Brent, kind of reading those notes from Ruth Perry, the handwritten notes, kind of rings it all true. And kind of, we're all hurting here, I think, as a kind of collective body today. And, Brent's right. We need to desperately kind of move things forward now. And use this tragedy as it is to really try and look at the situation, try and move things to a workable solution, because this is also linked with something else we're going to talk about recruitment, retention. All these things are linked with well-being as well. So I'm really interested to hear what Miss H has got to say, though, if she's ready to go.
We've also got Paula. You're ready to go as well, Paula, if you want to chip in, Paula King.
I'm not sure Paula's on as a speaker. We do have Miss H, but unfortunately Miss H hasn't been able to unmute herself. Miss H, on the bottom left-hand side of your mobile phone, there is a mute button, and it
right,
should...
my microphone's on. I'm
press that to say the mic is on. Paul is here.
Yeah, I'm good.
Hi,
I'm good to go. It's a difficult one. Ruth was my friend. Ruth and I were at school together, and she was a formidable individual. She was so clever, so strong. We were a gang of four, and out the four of us, Ruth was the one who was going to do things in life. She was the leader. She was in charge. I'm also a teacher. I've just had Ofsted last week. So today is a funny day for me. I just want to chip in on the thing about diversity. We were criticised heavily last week for not being a diverse school. And we weren't given a platform, really, to say, actually, like the colleague that spoke earlier, we may be a Catholic school. We have Polish children. We have African children. We have Irish children. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know what the Ofsted inspector was trying to imply, but we weren't really given an opportunity to set our own context. I really felt that they came in with an agenda and worked to prove their own agenda. And I can't help thinking that that's what happened with Ruth. You know, she was on a
Yeah.
safeguarding committee for the borough. She had all that knowledge in her head. They were firing questions at her, and she wasn't given the time and space to answer. And until that nasty little codicil where a school that is inadequate is forcibly academised, which is Conservative Party policy, until that is removed, I don't think we're ever going to get a platform where we can set our context, we can set our stall out, where people are ready to listen to us. They're coming in with an agenda, and we have to disprove that we're inadequate as a starting
Yeah.
point. And I am aware I'm emotional today. It was a tricky one for me, but that's really just what I wanted to say.
Well done. You've held it together, and I say her legacy is. I'm sure you could say this. I think she'd be quite proud of the fact that she, as you said, it was one making a difference. She is making a difference, and her school. I read her when I first read the Ofsted report. I would have been proud, and I would be so proud to send my children to that school, because I've worked in a Catholic school for 20 years. I'm still there because we have a similar ethos: community, identity, service above self, working towards helping people. And she, from everybody I've ever spoken to about her, everything I've ever read about her, is the type of person that we need in education, who is altruistic, who's kind, who, literally fought tooth and nail for her children. And that's the legacy of that, I suppose, is that the £60,000 was raised so quickly. Everything that they put against the family, and I suppose the sister, the friends, Flora, who's been here earlier, who obviously stood up to Ofsted and wasn't going to let them into her school. I mean, fantastic. It's been one of the positives, isn't it, to see the rallying round of the school community around Caversham, but also the profession rallying around itself, supporting each other. And I think that is one of our. I saw it during COVID, where we and again we saw today that we have the guys in charge during COVID. We were right to fight them on making sure that our schools were safe for our children. I think we're right about a lot of things, and sad that we have to keep fighting against systems which ironically work against us, and that's the real tragedy. And in that sense, what we're seeing here is one of the good people, one of the people who sacrificed a lot for their children, for their school, for their community, and ultimately was doing it for the right reasons, was in a sense a victim of a system that is cruel and
Yeah,
harsh,
Brent,
and it led to her
can I
death.
just
So
raise something that Paula said is quite interesting?
yeah,
The fact that obviously this inquiry's been going on now, kind of in the background. If Paula was inspected very recently, it shows that there's not really much change going on internally, Ofsted.
and that's a very good point, because there's me saying that I had my Ofsted inspection in
Yeah.
2010, where I was able to discuss and argue about my school having more diversity, because of exactly what Paula said there about, I've got a lot of Irish, Italian, Eastern European, and Irish sort of second and third generation children in a Catholic school. Now that doesn't on paper look like diversity, but actually in reality it is diversity. But I was able to make that case, have that conversation, and convince my Ofsted inspector in 2010 that my judgment that we have more diversity was correct. But Paul is saying is that the system's still there, because she's just said it. She didn't feel as if they could do that they could have the same argument I could have, or the same relationship with the HMI that I had in 2010. So you're right, Adam. I
So,
think you're
Brent,
absolutely right. Yeah.
it's worth noting, of course, and we've got to be very careful here. Ofsted does have a right to reply, and they have put out a statement. So I'll read out Ofsted's statement, and then we shall discuss that. Amanda Spielman has said today, Ruth Perry's death was a tragedy that deeply affected many people. My thoughts remain with her family, the wider Caversham school community, and everyone else who knew and loved her. On behalf of Ofsted, I'd like to say sorry to them for the distress that Mrs. Perry undoubtedly experienced as a result of our inspection. After Mrs. Perry's death, we made changes to the way we work to help reduce the pressure felt by school leaders. We will do more. The coroner highlighted a number of areas of concern. We will work hard to address each of these as soon as we can, and we are starting that work straight away. We've started to develop training for all inspectors on recognising and responding to visible signs of anxiety. As a first step, we'll delay our inspections next week by a day so we can bring all our lead school inspectors together ahead of further school inspections. As well as addressing the issue of anxiety, we'll be clear with inspectors what to do if a pause is needed. We'll also make it clear for our inspection handbook that school leaders can be accompanied by colleagues in meetings with inspectors and that they can share inspection outcomes with colleagues, family medical advisors and their wider support group before they are shared with parents. From next week, we'll provide all schools with a number to call if they have concerns about their inspection. This will put them directly in touch with someone senior from Ofsted. It's right that we inspect first and foremost in the interest of children, their parents and carers, but in the light of Mrs. Perry's sad death, it's also vital that we do all we can to minimise stress and anxiety when we inspect. Our inspectors are all former, all current school leaders. They have a deep understanding of the work that schools do and the demands on school leaders because they have done that work themselves. We'll continue to listen to heads and teachers and to refine and improve the way we work with school staff in mind. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people have many thoughts about that statement from Amanda Spielman today. And so we'd really appreciate it if people were to share those thoughts. They can either tweet along with the space, bottom right-hand side of your screen, there's a speech bubble. You can tweet your thoughts on that. Or if you'd like to call in, be 10% brave and be a speaker, then the mic button, request to speak, on the bottom left-hand side as well. Brent, that's pinned to the top as well.
It is, yeah.
I'd say, you know, if we just sort of take a step back and be objective here, the reaction to that statement from a wider educational community has been overwhelmingly negative.
I think the irony is when you take that statement in isolation, that doesn't seem, you know, it seems like a decent statement. You know, I come back to it. Lessons are learned. Yes, and here's the cynicism kicking in. Lessons are learned. But when you cross-reference that with the BBC interview on the Women's Hour and the lack of contrition then and the constant, you know, sort of denials up until this point, until this verdict, basically. Even the suggestion that I think Amanda Spielman said, "Oh, there was nothing wrong with the conduct of the Ofsted inspection," and quite simply, it's that argument that I think has wound people up. The lack of it's taken this inquiry for them to admit what we all knew, and it shouldn't have had to take an requirement. It shouldn't have to take a fundraiser. It shouldn't have had. The family shouldn't have to. The family lost their loved one. They shouldn't have to go through this to get to this stage, and that's where I think the palpable anger is about.
Oh, we've just lost Brent there. Go on, Brent. Are you there, Brent?
I might give him a break for a minute.
No, I'm still here.
No, he's still there. Brent, I'll just let you finish speaking, and then we brought in
I think
Shell, who's an ECT as well.
Yeah.
Carry on, Brent.
I just finished my point. I think that statement in itself is fine. I think it's that's what we need to hear from Ofsted, but we need to see changes. But the palpable anger is because the mood music before this has been one of complete ignorance, of we're not admitting anything. It's almost, again, a political thing of don't admit to anything, nothing to see here, move along. Then all of a sudden they have to change the tune because the coroner's come out. It shouldn't have taken the coroner's report. And Amanda Spielman needs to be more humble in the fact that what she said 2 weeks ago is completely out of sync with what's been said today. And you can't get away with that in this day and age. You can't get away with that.
We've got people queuing up, so should we go?
Yeah,
we do. Shall we have a look and see who we've got? So we've got Shell, who's an ECT in year 2. We've got Robert Hewitt. It says he's a history RQT, and we've got Rupert as well from UCL. So if we start with Shell first. Or whoever meets themselves first, I suppose. We've got Shell, we've got Robert, and we've got Rupert. It's a race to find the unmute button. Who will be first? Robert's first. Robert. Okay, Robert. Very good evening. History RQT. How are you this evening?
I'm good, thank you. What it just annoyed me about the Spielman statement is how can one day be enough to change anything? It's a very kind of, I just find the thing a bit of a deluded statement, really. It's going to take more than one day to train people on how to spot anxiety and change the ways that they're carrying out their inspections. It's they should be pausing it until the new year at least. It's going to take like the rest of the school year to be able to make sure you change your inspections to meet this issue with anxiety and mental health.
It sounds like from what Paula was saying, even to kind of last week, there was issues with the inspection that she had with people kind of in her school. So it sounds like you got to change a culture, which is going to take a while, isn't it? So I think you're right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way shall I jump in at that point, or
Yeah.
go back to Robert? Yeah. I think what I'd ask in response to that statement is this: it's like what it doesn't do is address what is it about Ofsted inspections that can take a brilliant woman in her prime, loved by her entire community. The school's a stone's throw from where I am. I couldn't get my kids in there; it was too popular when we moved here 6 years ago. I pass it every day. Her name's still up there. But a woman in her prime, loved in her community, doing a great job. No history of mental health. Our local GP spoke quite eloquently about, what good shape she was in and how resilient she had been through the lifetime that he had known her. And within a few months, a couple of months, she had died by suicide. And what that statement doesn't address, not what no one there will address, is what is it how could an inspection be so aggressive, so dispiriting, that it could lead to that in such a short time? And whilst we haven't had coroner's reports like this in every case, we know it's not the first time, or the second, or the third. And what it doesn't then stop to do, that statement, is to just acknowledge that there's a problem with how stressful these inspections are. Not how do we ameliorate it, how do we mitigate it a bit, how do we stop if it's unbearable? Why is it unbearable? What is it about these inspections that you that you subtly approve or demand is unbearable? And what we have is a culture of trial by ordeal. It's an intensely macho culture of trial by ordeal that has developed and grown in response to a sort of dialogue with government over the last 25 or 30 years, that's to push ever harder and further to try to catch people out, to try and humiliate, to try and keep head teachers in a narrower and narrower track of obeisance to policies and directions that are centrally dictated.
Can I just add a point onto that very quickly? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the issue is we've got with Ofsted inspections is that a lot of people work in the private sector. Now the private sector is very much that kind of way of doing things as well, like trying to catch people out, trying to run things on the smallest budget you can, try to make the biggest profit and whatever else. It doesn't relate to schools very well. I think the whole thing needs to be like just the whole culture of who's inspecting, like the government being in charge of the DfE and all that kind of stuff. Who's like running the system? It needs to relate more to schools than just like this idea of trying to get the most you can out of schools with the tightest budgets and all this kind of stuff like that. It's just the whole thing is just wrong.
So you're saying that Ofsted becomes like a catch to work out what's value for money.
Basically, yeah, and whether our schools are working, it's all down. You know what I mean? I think schools are not should be run like businesses, and it's checked like they are businesses in terms of how things, how we're meeting data and how results we're getting and things like that. We're talking about a world of people and things that get in the way of these things as well. Don't even get considered, and it's just
that's a really good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just want to bring Brent's attention to the fact that Executive Head Teacher Flora Cooper has joined as a speaker. Now, Flora is a friend of Teachers Talk Radio and has been for several years. I remember very clearly personally when Flora made a very brave decision to try to bar Ofsted from entering her school because her school got the call on the same day as my school did. And I remember reading the email we got from our executive officer saying that we'd had the call, and at the same time reading a WhatsApp message from Flora. And I won't say go into any details, where Flora had basically told Tom Rogers, myself, and a few other people of what she was intending to do. So, Flora, it is a real privilege to have you here on Teachers Talk Radio
Well,
tonight.
you know, I like rebels. You know, I love rebellious people.
I know you do. I know you do, Brent. And yeah, Flora, it's great to have you on. It's been a very somber day. We were hoping just to hear your reflections, I suppose, on Ruth and on tonight's and on today's report.
Hi, Flora.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I think, just listening and reading people's tweets and just thinking of the family. I mean, I can't even imagine. And I think for so many people today has been, this whole past week has been so difficult. And I think now just listening to everyone and again, seeing people's tweets, I think now we have got to make a stand. I mean, you can see already by Ofsted's response that their response is not going to be good enough and their change is not going to be good enough. And if we all don't stand together now, we won't make change happen. This is the chance. This is our time. We have to do it for Ruth. We have to do it for all the heads who every single time this inspection happens, all the wait for the inspection, all the way to that Wednesday until they can take a deep breath because they haven't had the call. I mean, it's absurd. It's crazy. And we are all allowing this to perpetuate. We're all helping this system continue. And until we all stand up, it's not going to stop.
I completely agree. As a trade unionist, as somebody who's standing for election actually in next year, I will use what meager, small political voice I have to be that irritation. But the whole profession is 500,000 people. And we are connected. We are individuals who can stand up, and that's why, full respect to you, Flora. I thought it was very brave of you. I thought it was exactly what was needed. More need to follow, and it's interesting seeing more guerrilla campaigns like that. More people who are refusing to follow instructions. There is a sort of small rebellion brewing, which listeners to my show would often find me saying, this is why I think they want to replace us with AI, because AI Flora would probably be a lot more easier controlled than real Flora. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We need to be that irritation, don't we? We need to now use this, because for me, it's just not about Ruth now. It's about the whole education system. The previous caller was absolutely right. The league tables is part of it. This culture
Absolutely.
This hot housing culture, this marketing culture, this business culture, schools and education are being semi-privatized through the back door. And you look at the school like Ruth's, which is what we would want education to be, for the community, by the community, integrated within the community, and the local people loving their school. As a previous caller said, couldn't get my children into that school because it was, so highly respected. And that's what we want. We want our schools to be, part and integrated within the community, and have our head teachers confident and feeling as if they're supported. And that's the thing, isn't it? Rather than criticize, because we get enough criticism and we need to support each other. And that's where I think we have to do. Do you feel then vindicated, Flora? Do you feel vindicated in the action you took? Do you think, yes, I was right to do that? And what would stop more people doing what you do, Flora?
I mean, I think what stops people is the fear. There is a very intense fear of Ofsted. There's the anxiety. There's, we talk about heads, and we're talking about heads obviously because of Ruth. But, people ask, where are the children in this? This is all about the children. The whole system's affected. And it all starts with the children. We've got SATs results, which we keep driving and we keep pushing because Ofsted expect good data. And if you don't have that data, then you're going to fail. You're going to be an inadequate school. And we are at the end of the day impacting our children more than anyone realizes. And until we change the system, our children are going to be impacted. We've got an education system that is actually ruining, the future of our children.
Yeah. And that's why I'm into education. I'm a working class kid who got through education for free. And I work in a deindustrialized area of Derbyshire with children who don't have the same life chances, ironically, than I have. And that really breaks my heart to see that the education seems to be now turning, like healthcare, like many other things, is becoming closed to many individuals and inconsistent. I might like to read this out to you, and whether you think this is true, Flora. So the senior coroner turns to the local authority and she says there was a power imbalance between them and the primary school in Ofsted, that no one wished to rock the Ofsted boat. There was a desire not to make things worse for all of the other Reading schools. So basically, let's keep our heads down. That's what that was saying, is that nobody wanted to rock the boat. They just went along with Ofsted because, as you said, there was that definite fear culture there.
There is so much fear. And I think that's what's come across in all the stories that people have been sending through to, a few of us who've been calling for stories, and people want to remain anonymous. They're so scared that they remain anonymous. And I haven't even really talked about my story of Ofsted, again, because it's that fear. It's that fear that, they're going to come back in. They're going to go down the road and be even tougher to a school down the road, and it was all, for me, it was about protecting the children. It was about protecting the staff. I think no matter how much we as heads try to take the pressure off of our staff and try to take that pressure off of them saying, we don't care about Ofsted. We're not doing things for Ofsted. We want you to be brave and try new things in your class for your children. The teachers still feel the fear of Ofsted, no matter how much leaders try and take that pressure off. And it's just, it is in the system so much more than any of us realize.
Yeah. So you're agreeing with what Brian said earlier on, our ex-expector, that it's the culture that needs to change, really, then, is that what you're
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it's the culture of it, and how that culture is, you are basically know that you are one word away from a career ending, or ending other people's careers, or destroying the education establishment. That's that fear, isn't it? It's on me. I could be that person that ruins people's lives, careers, ruins it. Because that's, something in Ruth's notes was, she was even worried. Oh, bless her. She was even worried about the property prices. So this inadequate Ofsted result was going to do to the local community. Her thoughts were with her staff, her community, everybody, the children, how it's all on her, and how that's it. I have brought this on the wider community. I'm now got an inadequate school, and even worry at that level that this would impact the wider community. That was such a burden to put on her shoulders. Such a horrible burden to literally do that to that individual.
Sorry.
Yep.
But that was what I was going to say. Is like, is it a cultural thing in Britain and the UK that has to change around this? It's not just Ofsted, is it? You just mentioned property prices, but how much do parents talk about Ofsted? How much do kind of local communities talk about Ofsted? How much is kind of the market value of a local town in all this now with Ofsted? It's not just about changing what an inspector does in a school, is it? It's the whole kind of culture around Ofsted, and the way schools are inspected, and kind of how we see schools in our community. What is this thing, a school, that we want for in our local communities?
But I think we as well, I know it's again something Tom was doing, of like, take down those banners.
Yeah,
Stop
definitely.
talking about your school being an outstanding school. That kind of inverse thing. I teach in an outstanding school. Well, congratulations. I teach in a requires improvement school, but it's an awesome school. It's again getting that lack of buy-in. We shouldn't buy into those judgments. We shouldn't buy into the language of it. We shouldn't play along with it. We should be, this is a good school. Ofsted is not, say it's not a good school, but hey, it's a good school. It's that, conversations need to have, rather than just accepting these judgments as well. Because that happens a lot when you look at a school and look at the Ofsted report, and you think that doesn't match. And so many stories, we had so many of these conversations up and down the country, where there are people saying our school was misjudged, our school was misjudged, our school was misjudged. They only looked at the data. I know my own school, it was when they put us into requires improvement, I felt it was they just picked upon, they wanted to do it, they picked upon 10 kids in mathematics who were a kid group that they said didn't make enough progress, and the whole school collapsed on that one thing. So I know exactly how that feels. I know exactly how that felt for a school that's always been good or outstanding to then be called requires improvement. And I did watch what it did to some of my colleagues, senior teachers, who then felt we failed. So I got a sense of, what it's like to have that done to you, and to then have to recover that and tick the boxes then and go, see, Ofsted, we've done everything you've thing. And for me, then that's about control, isn't it? This is, for want of a better word, they're bullying us. It's ironic. We tell kids to stand up to bullies, don't we? But this feels like Ofsted has been bullying the teaching profession, really. So
Mm.
I've got
Now, Brent, before
Edmund with us.
We've got Edmund Barnett Ward,
Yeah.
who's connected on as a speaker. Before we hear from Edmund, who has been probably the authority on X/Twitter when it's come to the inquest in the last couple of weeks, it's worth noting that all our shows on Teachers Talk Radio are brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, which publishes professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. To check out their latest releases, go to johncattbookshop.com and you can use the code JCTTR2324 to get 20% off your order. There are books about looking after your well-being, looking after the well-being of the students in your class, about embedding well-being in the curriculum as well. So it's one place to go tonight as well. Thank you to all of our speakers so far. We've had some comments which have come in. So the Heads Round Table have tweeted, they have said, first and foremost, our thoughts are with the family and loved ones of Ruth Perry. Too many have walked a similar path. Our thoughts and best wishes go out to them. What they've experienced recently would have been very difficult. They now must have due respect and compassion. What is urgently required now is absolutely not a pause for a day of training, but a commitment to fully pause Ofsted and reform the system completely. We've had a comment in from Terry. Now, Terry is in healthcare. He says, deepest sympathy with Ruth Perry's family, a complete tragedy, not for now, but the Care Quality Commission operates no differently from Ofsted. This is bigger. It comes from the top where we are now. I felt what Ruth felt. It's not acceptable. Stand up and be proud. Rest in peace, Ruth. Mr. C, in response to Amanda Spielman's statement, has said, how dare Amanda Spielman and Ofsted say that they will continue to listen to teachers and head teachers when they haven't once listened to a single thing we've ever said. Don't pretend for one single second you care. Now, Edmund has been on Sky less than an hour ago, and we're delighted and privileged actually to have Edmund on Teachers Talk Radio. So, Edmund, a very good evening to you.
I'm privileged to be here, especially the esteemed company that I can see also joined in. Lots and lots of names that I've interacted with on Twitter over the last few months.
How do you feel,
Sorry,
Edmund? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a perfect mixture of vindication and desolation.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult thing to articulate. I spend a lot of time crafting my tweets. I'm incredibly dyslexic, and
I am too. And the worst part of Twitter, that's one of the reasons I resisted Twitter. I cannot correct my tweets. I have to delete them and do them again, and delete them and do them again.
That's what I do. I delete occasionally I'll have done a stupidly long thread, and I'll realise there's some horrendous typo somewhere that I can't stand. I've received amazing support from Twitter. I'm going to carry on calling it Twitter because I'm old. But the thing is, you'll know, Julia isn't on the platform, and she obviously invests her energies in other ways, and so I felt very early on that actually all the things that we were doing were things that needed to be talked about. Now, at the start of this year, I had 20 followers, half of which were my family. And then by the start of the inquest, I had 1,000 followers, and I've got nearly 5,000 followers at the end of the inquest. And when you look at my follower list, you'll see repeated head teacher, senior leader, again and again and again. They're all educators, and the message that I'm getting back loud and clear from everyone is that this is a nexus point. It's all these things have. Oh, sorry, there's my front door bell just gone, but that's somebody getting from home. But no, I have I have this this incredible response based on, I know that this story is connecting with very many people.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Bet UK is empowering the everyday wins, cheeky grins, big conversations, budding aspirations. Our goal? To make EdTech accessible and teaching exceptional. Join the global education community on the 24th to the 26th of January 2024 as we make education better together. Tick it off your Christmas list today. Get your free ticket before the 13th of December deadline. Visit www.uk.betshow.com/visitor-registration.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's that it could have been any of us. It could have been any school. Ruth is all of us. And we all know, I've got a head teacher who I think the world of. Now, normally I'm the type of person that has a problem with authority, but I told him recently, I like you, which is my way of saying I don't want to go against you, even though I always go against authority. It's in my DNA. It's an Irish thing. But we all know somebody like a Ruth who, especially within teaching, an altruistic giver who is there for the right reasons. And that's, you're absolutely right. It struck a chord, isn't it? Because we're all Ruth. We could all have been Ruth. And we've all felt the pain of it because it could have been any of us in that sense.
That's it. I mean, again, for anyone who doesn't know, so Ruth went to the school as a child. She became an educator because it was her vocation. She was passionate about education. She prior to senior leadership, she was running maths improvement, so she was going into schools and improving maths, and this sort of irony about, she was part of a genuine improvement scheme. This idea that Ofsted is there to improve schools, and you just constantly asking yourself how is going in with the assumption that everything is bad and the school has to prove to them that it isn't. How is that a model for improvement? And then just walking away. I mean, to my mind, Ofsted are like arms dealers who just say, we just make the weapon, we're not responsible for how it's used. Except the difference with Ofsted is they'll build the bomb and take it to the school and set it off and walk away. And we had the worst thing you can possibly imagine happen to us in the loss of Ruth. But that is not to say that there is not a wealth of people out there who are incredibly damaged, and we can see that this is the case by the terrible retention problem there is in the sector at the moment.
So tell me, sorry,
I just wanted to butt in here. Sorry, Brent, because you've had a particularly sort of unique insight in the last couple of weeks, in that you have been, as Brent has mentioned already, you've been at the inquest every day, and you've been tweeting every day. Just to the people, to the teachers listening here, just tell us about that experience and the sorts of things you've learned from the last couple of weeks being at that inquest.
It has been absolutely eye-opening and fascinating. I just can't express how much of an eye-opening experience it's been, because for me, it's one thing to have faced off against the implacable face of Ofsted over the course of this year, with us all trying desperately to get them to even have the tiniest bit of introspection and look at their systems and look at their policies and even conduct the most basic review, serious case review, as any other decent company would that had any organization, I should say, that had that where a death had been involved in what they do. I mean, you can only need to contrast what happened with the NHS. The NHS had relatively little contact with Ruth, and yet they held a serious case review to see if there was anything that they could do better, if there's anything that they had done wrong. And Ofsted have not ever shown the slightest bit of introspection. Right from the start, their only concern was about whether they had done their inspection correctly according to their own framework. So they took their homework away, they marked it themselves, and they decided they'd done a brilliant job. And that's why all year long we've had Amanda Spielman saying that the inspection was fine. She even used the term "tested to death." She said that the findings of the inspection have been tested to death. It really couldn't be more offensive if it tried. So my experience over the last few days, this last week, and I stagger to believe that it's barely a week that's gone by, but my experience is that Ofsted, in micro, are the same as they are in terms of the whole organisation. I firmly have of the opinion that there, in fact, nothing could more exemplify the organisation than how they behaved during the course of the inquest, up to and including how their lawyer behaved and how their lawyer questioned incredibly dedicated educators who were there to, tell their truth on oath, and they still, were constantly trying to pick away at what was being said and undermine it, and it was utterly incredible. But I have just one thing I'd really like to say, which is very important.
Go ahead.
I obviously, in the process of writing out what happened every day, necessitated me to record the views expressed by the people involved in the inspection, and to contrast those views with the views of the educators that I know well from the school. And right from early on, it was very clear that there were two versions of this story that both had the same ending but were completely different. One version where inspectors went into the school and conducted a slightly awkward at the start inspection, but was essentially a perfectly normal inspection that came to perfectly valid results, and then walked away. And then another version of events where the senior leadership team recorded all of the complete horrors that happened at various meetings, the complete inconsistency of the inspection as it occurred, the issues that they identified with, without being specific, that there was a conflict of belief in terms of their evidential base. So there was a disagreement over the meaning of various things that the inspectors say they saw.
So what you're saying, Edmund, then, is you're saying, really, which is ironic, isn't it? You're saying that Ofsted, even in the coroner's this sort of inquest, even then they were still doing the same thing that they'd done to Ruth. And it's interesting that the coroner has said that Reading Borough Council, she said, their approach was a marked difference to Ofsted. The council evidence was open and accepting with clear desire to change things in the future, as opposed to Ofsted, which she criticised that they weren't as transparent, they weren't as open, they were contesting everything. And as you're saying, even the lawyer situation, they were using some sort of Americanized sort of lawyer to argue as much as possible. There wasn't that open transparency, and even from that, of kind of, this should have been easier even in the inquest to get to this result. But even that was difficult in itself, which mirrors, doesn't it? It mirrors why we're in this situation in the first place, really, doesn't it?
It does, and there was some unbelievable elements of irony in the way that they were dealing with the situation as well, because at one stage, so it's all a matter of record, and I won't be specific about the details, but there was an incident that the lead inspector had to physically intercede in. And then there was a radically different interpretation between the senior leadership team and the lead inspector about the meaning of that incident. So the educators at Caversham Primary used their knowledge of the people involved, the situation, specifically what it was, and came to a judgment. And he was not interested in listening to that at all. That's been the often quoted bit where he put his hand in Claire Jones' face, Claire Jones King's face, and said, I beg to differ, and sneered at her and was treated her in a very condescending way. The meeting that she had come into late, where Ruth was already shaking and in tears. Now, Ofsted, when talking about that incident, were going to talk about it in such a way as the pupils involved would have been identified. Now, just think about that in terms of safeguarding.
No.
Yes.
They're breaking their own rules.
The coroner had to stop the lawyer from talking and say, there's no way that you can do this. And we were given, we all heard the direction she gave very, very clearly at the start of the inquest, that under no circumstances was anybody to give evidence that identified an individual pupil at the school. So
let me get this straight. Ofsted failed the school, and in particular threw Ruth under the bus on a safeguarding technicality, while they themselves were about to breach a safeguarding at the inquest.
Yes.
I mean, that's just,
yes, and that that shows you. I don't. The thing about it is saying that is very important is that we mustn't look at the individuals. They're named. Their names are out there, and I have seen sort of semi pylons on the individuals, and I'm really, really keen to stress that they are a reflection of the system. They did not perform their duties in a vacuum. They were enabled by the system that created them.
Yeah.
And if we're honest, Ofsted wanted to style it out like, no, of course they were all competent, brilliant professionals. There's not a one of them that had been in the job more than 10 months. It's difficult, but I think that it's really important that this is a watershed moment where change has to occur, because really now, and anybody that has followed me on Twitter knows that I've also deconstructed elements of the of the Common Select Committee on Education's inquiry, and I was actually present when Amanda Spielman gave her evidence. I was sitting right behind her, but
and how did that feel?
It was very upsetting. So I was there with Julia and Lisa, and we were also there to see Gillian Keegan, and we had to leave at a certain point, and they were overrunning, so we left. And shall we say, the noise that Julia made as we exited the room certainly caught the attention of some local security guards. It's like, if you're ever at the Palace of Westminster, if you make a fuss, security people seem to come out of the walls. And
the last time I was there with this accent, they certainly did. Yeah, you can imagine. Question then: you've obviously you've obviously got the bite for this now. You're not letting this go, and I think that's the key question. Obviously, you've gone down that rabbit hole, and obviously with Julia's not either, and because you want the change now. This is only half the battle, isn't it? Really, this is the vindication. So where do we go from here? This is half the battle to get the fact that we know Ofsted's done this, but where do you think the campaign will go? Where next to get that change? And you mentioned obviously Gillian Keegan. You mentioned obviously Spielman. Where do you think we should go with this to change this then?
So speaking boldly, Amanda Spielman hasn't been interested. She's not. She. It's clear. It's clear from her responses and her reactions all year. She was not interested in having her reputation and her legacy tarnished in the final year by having to go through some terrible, inconvenient process of working out whether her system was damaging or not. So the chances of getting any decent response from her are vanishingly small. One thing that I will say is I'm not trying to be falsely boasting about this, but there are changes that we've had instituted in Ofsted this year that have made a material difference to educators' lives, and thank goodness, and not least of which is the change that means that any school that is in the same position as Caversham Primary, where they have all areas rated good or outstanding, and only an area in safeguarding that is to do with, relatively minor paperwork type issues that can be resolved in a small amount of time, as the inspectors completely agreed under oath in the inquest. There wasn't anything at Caversham Primary that couldn't have been sorted out in 30 days. And in fact, in one meeting, he even said 10 days. So it gives you the scope. It's not like it was a sort of culture of poor safeguarding issues where children were in danger. We're talking about some omissions to the central record. It's not a whole culture that had to change. But in that case, in a school in the same cases, in the same situation as Caversham, would now not, although the academy order would technically be put in place, they wouldn't enact it until the school had a second inspection, no more than 3 months after the original inspection. And and that would be a two-part process. First of all, the inspectors go in and do an audit of safeguarding on day one, and if that's fine, then they have a quick inspection on a second day. And that's what happened at Caversham Primary, and it's now rated good for all of their stupid, useless gradings are worth.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That vindicates again the investment of time, because you must be spending a lot of hours doing this. And I'll say this. I'm going to thank you. I absolutely thank you from the bottom of my heart. As a teacher, we need people like you, because you could have easily walked away from this. You could have easily sort of dropped out. And there must have been days when you thought this is taking an emotional toll out of you. I know I've campaigned myself on issues, and it's those cold, dark nights when you think you're getting nowhere, and you will have a couple of days to sort of reflect on it and think. And I'm sure a lot of people will be thanking you, but genuinely speaking, we need more people, more parents like you to defend us teachers. And it's great to have you done that. And thank you for all you've done with keeping us up to date on that as well, because it is a thankless job. You're not getting you're not getting paid for it. Again, this is an example of altruism. You're doing this because it's the right thing to do. You're doing this because somebody had to do it. So thanks for stepping up, and thanks for doing that, because it was a difficult thing, wasn't it? And the more you've got into it, the more you probably think to yourself, oh gosh, what have I got myself? You've gone down the rabbit hole, haven't you? And once you've gone down that rabbit hole, you're now going to want to see through. And I hope that we do get more, because that's the thing. And we need more people like you, Edmund, to be fighting that fight. And same with Flora. I think Tom's gonna ask a question to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to something that Edmund had said about 10 minutes ago about the legal representation at the inquiry regarding Ofsted. And I want to sort of dive into that as well, but also the legal representation for Ruth's family, because a few days before the inquiry, we learned that the family would be denied legal aid, and therefore a fundraising campaign was launched, and I believe £70,000, more than £70,000 now, was launched, and that was raised, and that has enabled Ruth Perry's family to have their legal representation in the inquiry. And Edmund, given that you were there, I just wanted to sort of gain your perspective on how things may have gone differently had the family of Ruth Perry not had that legal representation fighting their corner for them, given the nature of the legal representation that Ofsted had, and some of the things that had been said by individuals employed by Ofsted as well during the inquest too.
Well, I mean, they would have been wiped out. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the legal costs are vast. You know, they're a good salary. You know, they're not a year's salary. There's not there's no easy way of dealing with it. And to be honest, I'm not sure what would have happened. I think that you know, you'll have seen Julia in action. If she potentially would have represented the interests of the family herself, or they would have had to have, you know, done goodness knows what to get the money. But it was an absolutely horrendous situation, and literally 3 days before the start of everything, she contacted me, and I was like, well, right, so we're fundraising now, let's do that. That's okay.
Did you feel as though those who were there speaking on behalf of Ofsted, you know, Chris Russell's been on Teachers already before, but also sort of the inspectors involved in giving evidence at the inquest who had been involved in the inspection of Caversham, how prepared and how rehearsed do you think some of those contributions were?
Well, there was several times. I mean, Lisa and I sat together every day. Lisa Telling, who's another Reading head, and knew Ruth very well, and Lisa and I and Julia are the unit that have been going into the Department of Education and meeting with Gillian Keegan and all the rest of it. We sat together, and there were many times when people showed considerably less simple Ofsted process knowledge than we have, having gone through many of their books in minute detail this year for various reasons. But yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I think that Chris Russell was put up because he's about to retire. I think he's a useful idiot as far as Ofsted is concerned, because they can just dissociate themselves from his failure. He kind of the door closes when he leaves. the core of the entity that is Ofsted is kind of protected. All of the people that have are connected to this dreadful, period of the inquest are sort of, in a way, disposable.
That's an important point, really, in the sense that Ofsted were trying to game the coroner's court, as much as they could in order to have, maximise their chances of, or minimise their chances of reputational damage, I suppose. And there were times in the week where, I think there was one moment where there was some considerable, talk and considerable speculation that Ofsted may, in fact, have misled the coroner's court as well with some of the evidence that they had given, particularly around the training for inspectors around anxiety and around stress as well. Could you give us a little bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, so I mean, there were a number of different areas where this kind of thing came up. So how can I put this? I feel very strongly that every Ofsted witness that took the stand was very heavily coached, because they all use very similar phrases, and it could, if you're being fair, you could say, oh well, there's a certain type of person that works for Ofsted, and so they would use those phrases. But it just really felt to me like the same kind of verbiage was coming out in the description of various processes. Whenever they talk about the importance of safeguarding, whenever any question was put about safeguarding, that that it would always be put in terms of the lawyers the lawyer would say, the serious safeguarding failings at Caversham Primary, or what, they would always use these same phrases, but there were some very peculiar decisions made. So one of them was that all of the inspectors insisted that they'd had this very rigorous, for want of a better word, empathy training, that they'd all been taught to be, courteous and considerate and care about the feelings of the people that they were inspecting, and, etc., etc. And so the coroner just very rightly said, well, okay, if you train your personnel in these processes, let me have all your training materials so that I can see exactly how you're training them. You must, if you train them, you must have written guidance on training. So let's see what that is. And that was asked for on day 2, and she said, and presumably you train people all the time, so it'll be readily to hand, and I won't have to wait for it. And 4 days later, over the weekend, they deliver a 76-slide presentation, PowerPoint presentation, which is the standard presentation that they deliver their training with, and it was delivered in 3 forms. So they had the training as it appeared in 2022, obviously, that would have informed the inspection on Caversham Primary, the training as it appears now, and another document that highlighted the differences between the two. And in addition to that, down on the right-hand margin of every slide, there was, for want of a better word, interpretation. So, the note said, this is the point that we talk about caring for people's feelings, and you look at the slide, and it's the slide for something like how long the introduction meeting should take. It was what they were saying was not in any way backed up by the physical evidence that they produced, and it was very clear that what they had effectively done is a word search through their training for keywords such as anxiety, and at that point they had claimed that these things were the point where you would do training, and Heidi, the coroner, was incredibly generous to them, but she highlighted such a brilliant example in her summation today, which was, there's this one slide, and this is where you should consider the well-being of the head teacher during inspections. And she says, so this one training slide contains 6 points of discussion, and the guide time for that training is 2 minutes, and that was the sum total of any reference to well-being that occurred in the entire document.
No.
Yeah.
So really what they were trying to do was they were trying to retrospectively say, oh, we're doing all this stuff, but much like a teacher trying to cover up when Ofsted come in and they're skim marking a couple of books, they got found out, didn't they? They really got found out big time.
And Heidi Conner even used this brilliant phrase at one stage that people seem to be constantly using, the retrospectoscope, to look through stuff. And she had a irascible sense of humor. She was incredible, sort of saying, at the start of her Regulation 28 day, she said, I really want to get to this point, this other point, which I'll go on to as well, this idea of pausing an inspection, and this, bear in mind, was a stick that Ofsted beat the deputy head teachers with. If you so believed that Ruth Perry was in such distress, why didn't you pause the inspection? Why didn't you stop it? And there's Claire James King said, it's a complete power imbalance. How am I supposed to turn around to the inspector who's causing me this distress and say, no, stop? And Jo Grover, oh my goodness me, she was so upset, so angry. I could know her so well, because the lawyer had said, you can't have thought that Ruth was upset because you didn't comfort her, you didn't hug her. And she said, you can bet your life the minute those inspectors were out the door, my arms were round her faster than you can possibly imagine.
But doesn't that show you the lack of understanding of the culture of a school and the organic nature of a school, and how people, going into an Ofsted inspection is just like the Battle of the Somme. It's trenches. You're in those trenches, and all you can think about is an Ofsted inspection. My books, I know people who have pulled all-nighters, who stayed in school practically all night to get their books ready because they didn't want to be, and that's just ordinary staff members. But when you get to the higher levels, you ratchet, and Board of Governors as well. I mean, they get it too. So the whole sort of organization around the school, the higher up you go, the more the pressure there is, isn't there? And the more the feeling of that pressure. And that's why, I can understand why 9% of head teachers have walked last year. Do you really want that? Do you really want to put up with that level of life-changing pressure?
Why would you want to do the job if that's what you get?
Yeah.
I mean, and also to add as well, there's like that senior leadership team, Nikki Leroy and Claire and Jo, they were so caring. They were so worried about Ruth, but they were so they didn't want to undermine her. There's no way that they would have hugged her or done that, because it's about showing the respect for the person. You deal with the situation when it's just you, and the antagonist is gone. You don't show that weakness in front of it, not weakness, but you don't show that in front of the antagonist. They had too much respect for Ruth for that.
Yeah.
And I think, again, this is a thing that Heidi Conner praised the quality of the evidence they gave. And I think I said this, that the truth is very simple to tell and very easy to understand. When you express the truth, you can just be very very clear about it, and all three of them were so dignified, and Neil Warren as well to a certain extent. I say the chair of governors, he was amazing, but that is contrasted by simple questions such as, do you have written guidance on looking after the well-being of teachers? Yes or no to Chris Russell, and a 10-minute answer, a politician's answer, dancing around the houses, talking about...
It's that lack of it's that difference. It's almost David and Goliath there, isn't it? What you're saying is that from one side there was honest candor, there was reflection, there was honesty, there was transparency. From the other side, it was lawyering up, basically, to use the American term, lawyering up, don't admit to anything, try and duck and dive and weave it, as you say, coaching, and literally don't say this, don't say that. And that in itself is exactly the type of culture that we are trying to get away from. We want, honesty, where senior members of staff can turn around and say to Ofsted without fear, this is why we're going to fix this school. But even in this inquest, all what you're saying is, even in the inquest, which is getting to the point of why a head teacher has taken their life, they are demonstrating the behaviour which has actually created this inquest in the first place, really, isn't it?
Exactly. And there's so many things, so many little elements that come back to me that are so distressing. I haven't even tweeted about. Honestly, I could tweet till next Christmas on this inquest in terms of the things that went on there. But another thing that was absolutely astounding to me is that all three of the inspectors were given an opportunity by the coroner to say what they would do differently, and none of them expressed regret, because clearly they'd all been coached by Ofsted that expressing regret implies fault. So therefore, you mustn't do it. And so the lead inspector talked for very many minutes about what a better person it had made him.
No.
Yes. So the death of our primary school head, of a much loved community figure, is merely another step on his improvement journey.
But at the same time, and I give you credit, you have, and I think you're right in this, not to get angry, not to seek sort of like, we want to get our own back on these guys. I think that mantra of, right, let's not throw them under the bus the way that they threw Ruth under the bus. They've got to reflect. Yeah.
Yes, and you need to always reflect on that very important issue. These people are part of a system, and they are a reflection of that system.
Yeah.
And I know as well, this is another thing, and it's a very important point as well. I know that there are loads of inspectors who are incredible, who genuinely do try to have dialogue with the schools that they go into, and I think the main point is not that we try to single out people, but we create the system that's going to support the quality of inspection that we need, and and support the inspectors to do to inspect in the correct way.
So, talking of the system, then there is the inquest coming up, isn't it? That there's the parliamentary inquiry, isn't there? And you have said you've talked to Gillian Keegan. You have said, who else do you think? Where else do we go with this now? How do we go further? What's Julia and yourself now planning further to this now, to the second part then?
Well, we have been told that we are the first external meeting that Sir Martin Oliver is taking in the new year. Very early in the new year, very, very early in the new year, we're all going to go into Ofsted headquarters,
into the belly of the beast.
Into the belly of the beast, and we're going to meet Sir Martin, who is very interested in talking to us, which is nothing but positive in my eyes, because immediately that's a change in direction in terms of, the basic communication. So Amanda Spielman, I think, claimed that she tried to contact Julia 4 times, and I just, one of those things where you think, why do you say these things? We have the single email when she did try, when she didn't go directly. Here's a thing: you can Google Julia Waters and you can contact her through the press office of her university. It is not difficult. Whereas Amanda Spielman sent a roundabout email to the local authority, and only because basically Laura Koonsberg had pressured her into saying that she would do the meeting. It came after that, and that was months after everything. There was absolute radio silence, nothing at all, and then this sort of very half-hearted invitation to a meeting, which
and it's that sort of so putting aside the outgoing administration, because there's not much we can do about that. So you think Sir Martin has a perfect opportunity to use this as an opportunity to say, right, I've got something now which will allow me to change the culture. He couldn't have asked for a better way to say, look, we need to make a change, and he's got the evidence to make a change. So if the new head of Ofsted wants to go to his political masters and say to his political masters, we really need to do something about this, because here is the evidence, he really has a really good start, hasn't he, to put his change and his change of direction, because he's got evidence now to show that there is a change of direction needed. So
he does, without getting into the constitutional quagmire of exactly how. Actually, I will get into that quagmire. So one of the difficulties that we've had in terms of, for want of a better word, compelling Ofsted to do the right thing prior to this inquest, is that from a regulation perspective, Ofsted really are unique. They cannot be compelled. So this goes back to the Education and Regulation Act of 2006, which is the foundation document for the current version of Ofsted. Now, within that, you learn the staggering truth that the Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, is literally answerable to no one other than the King. Only the King can remove her. She is not answerable to the Secretary of State for Education. She is quasi answerable to the Commons Select Committee on Education, which is why she's a little bit more contrite and when she's talking to them. But she is not compelled to do anything. Her mandate from that piece of regulation allows her to set up an inspection regime as she sees fit. And so the direction as to what she is assessing obviously comes from the DfE. That's why it's such an incredible, complex spaghetti of areas of jurisdiction, of the different parts. So obviously, the DfE define the rules for things like safeguarding and keeping children safe in education, but it's Ofsted that take those rules and decide how they're going to assess whether schools are sticking to them or not. But when it comes to actually changing Ofsted, I'm not. You've got one of two choices: either you get a sympathetic chief inspector who is interested in meaningful dialogue with the DfE and the Secretary of State for Education, or you re-regulate, and you have to have an Act of Parliament which changes the entire nature of the inspectorate. That's another fantastic revelation that I didn't know over the course of the inquest, is that they are only they're only the regulator of early years, but they are technically, so So the inspectorate rather than the regulator. So the regulator for some areas of education, but not for others. Oh, it's so ridiculous.
It's only twigged on me that they are His Majesty's inspectors now, and I've only twigged on that. Actually, I always thought they were, under the Department of Education.
No.
But now, actually, that makes so much more sense that they are His Majesty or Her Majesty's inspectors. I didn't realize that. I thought that they had to answer to much like the police commissioners. I didn't realize that they were separate in that sense.
Yeah, they have legal powers. It's actually unlawful to prevent them from entering a school. Keep
quiet, Flora.
Yeah, so don't tell Flora, because I know this has been something she's been, dancing around with for quite a while, and I'm saying it's not a good idea. It's really not a good idea.
Oh, I like the sound of that. You may not pass, doing a Gandalf, get the little stick and go, you're not coming in here, right now. I'm His Majesty's inspectors. I would go, well, I don't believe in a monarchy, so you can go somewhere else. You can imagine that. I didn't realize they had that, yeah.
Just to sort of jump in on that, then, so it is unlawful to prevent Ofsted from coming in, but then where does one stand on this idea that if we can pause an inspection, telling inspectors once they've arrived on the premises to leave the premises until it's such time as the inspection can continue? Where are we on that in terms of the law?
Well, this is one of the things that makes the whole concept of pausing a fantasy. Because, so again, just to go back on this, that they introduced this idea of pausing, and so then again, the coroner wanted to understand what that mechanism was. If such a mechanism existed, how is it instigated? So again, they were asked to produce the written guidance on how pausings occur, and all they can produce was the deferral guidance. My English isn't the best in the world, but deferral means stop before it started. Yes, that's what that guidance is meant to highlight. All of the reasons that a school can give for denying entry of an inspection, and they can be things such as, we've just got a major water leak. There's a pipes burst, or it could be things such as a pupil or member of staff being taken seriously ill, or it can include emotional reasons as well, such as a bereavement. But my experience, and certainly from what I'm hearing from people on Twitter, is that they very rarely pause an inspection for that reason. So that was another whole load of legal chicanery that involved the pausing. So where we're at with the pausing is, they say yes, it's possible, but how it would work is that the Ofsted regional director in charge of the area in which the school is the person who gets to decide whether the pause occurs. And if you want to pause, then the person who you have to make the case to that you want the pause is the lead inspector in the inspection. So in a case where somebody is suffering acute mental distress because of the way that they are being treated by an inspection team, they are meant to, in Ofsted's eyes, say to the lead inspector, I'm in acute mental distress and I need to pause this inspection. And that inspector is supposed to work back up the line to the regional director and get permission to pause. It's just fanciful. I mean,
but it might be the lead inspector who you have the issue with. So you've got no effective whistleblowing mechanism there. Because that's the whole idea of a whistleblowing mechanism. You've got an issue with your head teacher. You've got your chair of governors. There's got to be somebody you can go to then, if it's the person who is causing. And it sounds, in this case, obviously, that there was inspectors coming into Ruth's school who were the issue. But where could you go? And in this day and age, you think of what we are as teachers, the amount of criticism, the amount of accountability that we're under. it's ironically the I often say this to children: who polices the police? Who polices the police? The police, the police. Well, it's who Ofsteds the Ofsteds. You know, who do we then is accountable to? Who can you go to then to make a complaint about Ofsted? But the very person who you're actually making the complaint about, technically, then, aren't you?
Exactly, and it sort of comes back to their idea as a regulator. Now, when we look at regulators in any other sector, when you look at Ofcom, Ofqual, any of the other regulators that are set up to look at other sectors, they have a series of foundational pillars which are absolutely vital to any regulator. So they have to be transparent. They have to be consistent. They have to be fair. They have to be accountable. They have to, these things are things that are true all across the board. And of course they need to be specific and targeted to the sector, to a particular sector. But Ofsted fails on all of them. All of them. They are inconsistent. They are not transparent. They say things like they don't want safeguarding to be a tick box exercise, and so therefore it's about the interpretation of the inspector as to whether the elements of safeguarding are right or wrong. Whereas where you get other, I'm sure another. So right, if I take this back
I
to the
think the police. One example I'd say is the police ombudsman. God, that was a struggle. So the police I said it once, I can't say it twice. The police.
Ombudsman.
That's him, or her, or they, who knows? That's the police ombudsman, and they
Yeah.
are the independent and impartial person that you go to if you're going to make a complaint about the police. So you'd need an Ofsted ombudsman, or person, and literally there doesn't seem to be that level of organization or that layer in there, is what you're saying.
Your single choice, if you are to go down that route, is a judicial review, which is mind-staggeringly difficult to instigate and hugely expensive. So there needs to be independent oversight of Ofsted, and there needs to be that there needs to be somewhere to go when something goes wrong.
And here's the irony, is that we've had a professional today, and we had a professional, the coroner's report, as an independent professional, and from the sounds of it, reading between the lines, and you were there, Heidi Connor committed herself with absolute professionalism and diligence and impartiality. I mean, you're there, you could confirm that. But there is a person literally doing that type of job, weighing up the evidence, looking at all sides, professionally looking at it objectively, and they have produced, which we would agree is a report which is fair and balanced. But we shouldn't, again, goes down to it, we shouldn't have to have a coroner because one of our head teachers has had to take their own life as a result of Ofsted doing this job, is what we're really saying, isn't it, really?
I cannot tell you how much we cried. I cannot tell you how emotional it was listening to that vindication. That look, the people in that room, the people there the non Ofsted side of things, and the observers, us group of observers, most are teachers. So again, it's not reported. It's just what happened. That different Reading primary heads came every day by the dozens. I think there are 50, 54, 56 primaries in the Reading area, and the majority, the heads came for at least one session, and the professional respect and care and love in the room from those people, it was just such a a chasm to me looking at them in comparison to the other people, the Ofsted side of things, who even in the pre-inquest, they brought in 7 lawyers. And then in the actual inquest, they have their row of 5 lawyers, and then a couple of rows of Ofsted witnesses, and Matthew Purvis, the Southeast Ofsted Regional Director, Chris Russell, various of the inspectors were there, various other policy bods from Ofsted, all sort of looking over it, and we were there for a person,
It's that comradeship, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing that schools do well. That's what we look after each other, we care for each other because we're altruistic, because we're people listen to this call have obviously been somewhere experienced in this, and please, by all means, chip in. Feel free to ask questions of Edmund. Edmund, you're an absolute Trojan, my friend. If you want to take a break or you want to keep going on, by all means, because this is absolutely fantastic. And
I'm happy to keep going until about 10, and I have to admit, I probably I want to watch what the news has been saying about all of this.
But that is important to see what the narrative and how far up the news agenda it is, isn't it? Because we have got a lot of news today with Boris and the COVID inquiry, and it's the cut through, isn't it? It's how we get that cut through. How do we get this to? And again, Ofsted accused, didn't they? That was a horrible thing, and I know your reaction to it would be the same as all of us. It's this idea that Ruth's death was being used or weaponized to discredit Ofsted 2 weeks ago was completely out of sync, and the vindication today of the judgment completely undermines that, because as you're saying, there was an honesty, a transparency, a reflectiveness coming from the evidence given by the teachers versus the lawyered up Ofsted establishment, because in a way what you had there is the ordinary people versus the establishment. It's the Erin Brockovich type of thing there, isn't it, where the truth and it's a powerful thing, the truth, isn't it? It has come out, hasn't it?
It is. I don't know if this actually. Again, it's because I don't know what the reporting's been like, and I don't know how extensively it's come out, and I don't even know if all of Heidi Connor's comments were in the materials that she produced for the press. But she was very, very unhappy with the comments that Amanda Spielman made, especially that comment on Woman's Hour, that it had been a very a very sad incident had been used as a pivot to attack Ofsted, and Heidi Connor said that Ofsted had been putting out their narrative about what had happened to Ruth, and this comes on skating very close to this is a very weird thing about inquests. This is a regulation 27, which is basically that you cut the coroner's job is to make findings of fact. So the coroner's job is to determine what, in balance of probability, actually happened.
Yeah.
So
using the actual evidence rather than opinion.
So hers is the, if you like, the only truth. So it's actually against the rules of the inquest to try and present the narrative to the coroner. You can't tell her what happened, in the sense of trying to direct her thoughts on that in that process.
So there's almost like a contempt of court with that, and using a different analogy
it's not that. It's not in that sense. It's not that serious. There would never be there's not a repercussion, but there's definitely a rebuke, and they had that, and the other one that she slammed down, which I thought was absolutely amazing, was so at the end of the Regulation 28 evidence day. So To explain to anyone that doesn't know, the regulation 28 is the prevention of future death report that runs alongside the actual inquest. So the inquest's final conclusion, which in this case was suicide contributed to by an Ofsted inspection, that's what will go on the death certificate. That's not the same as the regulation 28, which is a set of legally binding instructions that can be issued to an individual or organization to prevent future death. Now, very sadly, as the coroner said, there have been quite a few cases recently of the government trying to use legal chicanery to avoid complying with Regulation 28 orders, and she was sort of very direct in saying, I very much hope the Secretary of State for Education is going to listen to my
so not to water it down or to bend it, but literally be very clear that Ofsted
very clear about what about the things that need to be dealt with and improved. But at the end of the Regulation 28 hearing on Monday, which seems like a lifetime ago, she had said that all of the various lawyers representing what's known as the interested parties, which again legalese for an inquest, the interested parties are literally the people or organizations which have been cited as potentially having a role in a person's passing. So in this case, there were the family, obviously, the family's lawyers. There were also lawyers that represented Berkshire NHS Trust, which dealt with mental health issues. There was also a lawyer for Balmoral Park GP surgery, which Ruth was at, representing the GP. And there were lawyers that represented Caversham Primary School and the local authority jointly. Yeah. That was a terrible idea, but
would you rather them separate? Would you rather the
local
authority?
I thought it was a terrible conflict of interest because I'll come on to that later. But so each one of those parties at the end of the Regulation 28 day is allowed to suggest points that they feel are relevant to the Regulation 28 findings. So Ofsted's contribution to this at the end was to try and shut the whole thing down by citing a legal case, Dove, which relates to Hillsborough, and
the irony of that this week as well.
I know. But essentially, their argument was that in that case, the Regulation 28, the danger of future death report had been issued to an organisation because, or as a result of, expert medical, psychological medical testimony being given in the inquest. So their essential, to make it totally clear, Ofsted's argument was because no expert psychological evidence had been presented by a recognised expert, that meant that she shouldn't do this, and she should give what's called a short form verdict, which is literally the verdict would be death by suicide with no causality.
Oh, they did not.
Yes, they did. They tried to shut that down, and she was so excoriating in her review of this.
And that would have allowed them to say, "Well, you see, there's no evidence to connect us to it. Sorry, it's a tragedy." But yeah, that's what they would basically have tried to brush under the carpet and say, "There's no causal link. It's really sad. I'm sorry about that," and move on and end off.
Yeah, our inspection's still great. you don't have to worry about anything. That's how it went. And what she said was, she said it's the brilliant thing is, though, the decision is based on an evidential standard, and the quality of evidence given by the medical professionals who came up, the GP who'd known Ruth for 30 years, who came up and said she'd never had a day's mental health issue in her life before November of 2022, and I saw a rapid descent from that point. Her diaries have been I know have been
that is one of the hardest things. I mean, it must be difficult for anybody really connected to Ruth to read through those. I read them today, and it made me emotional. And I'm, gosh, well, anybody, that's.
There's a very important point to make about them. Ruth didn't keep a diary before November 2022, right? So she wasn't a person given to large bouts of introspection and writing down all her thoughts. That wasn't who she was.
That was a coping mechanism, basically. Then, wasn't it?
She was giving out. She was genuinely just getting all this stuff out, and so that in itself is just it's just another part of the of seeing what this poor woman's mental anguish was. It's just heartbreaking. It really is.
And it goes without saying, again, I'll repeat what I started with. If anybody is feeling that, in that situation, please reach out, please talk, please seek support, please talk to as many people as possible, human to human. I mean, I'm lucky enough, I'm married to a mental health professional, and that's a difficult job in itself at the moment. And there's sometimes, as teachers, we are in a very high impact, high stressful environment, and we do need ways. And I'll be honest, I've gone and talked to talk therapy myself, and talked to somebody a couple of years ago when I was struggling, and there's no shame in that. We do need sometimes to reach out, seek advice, seek help, and that was what I'd say on that, is that we all sometimes suffer from.
Can I give a little plug for Headrest?
By all means, please do.
Look them up. I mean, that founded by head teachers, there to support head teachers. I mean, it's one of those things. I'd implore anybody not to suffer in silence. It's obvious how you can see how there must be so many people out there who are exactly the same as Ruth, whose love for their school is no less, and love for their job is no less. And in those darkest times, we really do have to just look out to other people and look for that support, because it is there. There are so many people who will give that support.
Fantastic. Just gonna open up to anybody else who would like. I've got Kiri here who wants to speak. So we've got Christy Carter, who's a wellbeing coach. Oh well, hello. That's perfect. So Christy, if you want to just unmute yourself there in the bottom corner, because that's one aspect of this as well, isn't it? That it is an absolute tragedy what's happened to Ruth, but we are in a sector which has the last couple of years suffered a lot of kind of, I think, stress, and we are in a very stressful situation. And this is the thing about what's happened with Ruth, this was preventable, wasn't it? This was preventable, and a lot of these issues can be preventable. So, Chrissy, I'll just bring you in, and hiya.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for having me on. First of all, I want to say my thoughts are with Ruth's family, and just a massive thank you to you, Edmund. I've been following your tweets every single day, and just thank you for that. And the reason why I wanted to speak today is because there's so much of Ruth's story that I can echo, that I've experienced in my past. I was a secondary school head teacher up until August this year, and I had to step away from the job. And I've been trying to muster up the courage to share my story, and I was going to do it next week. But I think I'm going to share it here because it just feels like the right time to do it. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD in the summer from repeated trauma through work, and Ofsted has a huge part to that. And since I've been more open about it, other senior leaders or ex-senior leaders have reached out to me to say that they have been diagnosed with the same thing, PTSD, because of Ofsted. And I think there's a lot of us who are suffering from trauma or repeated trauma. And for me, I've just carried out some training. Sorry, I've just done some training myself to become a trauma-informed executive wellbeing coach, because I truly feel that there's a lot of people in the teaching profession at the moment who have faced trauma, who are facing trauma, and they don't know how to do it, how to close those trauma loops. So I'm just so passionate with what I'm doing now, being an executive wellbeing coach, helping senior leaders to not only reach their goals and success, but actually to look within themselves and understand that actually that self-care is much needed. So a little bit of how I got to that point. Uh, Last year I was on, sorry, let's go back to 2021. I was pregnant at the time, and I went on maternity leave, and I said to my senior vice principal at the time, I bet you Ofsted will decide to call when I'm on maternity leave. And guess what? 8 weeks after having my baby, the call came. So I literally went to the Ofsted inspection with my 8-week-old child strapped to me to sell the school. And the first day went really well. It was absolutely fine. And we were pretty sure that we were going to get a solid good in all areas. So much so that the next day I decided that I wouldn't go in. A lot of my colleagues were saying, don't go in because you are on maternity leave. We'll handle this. It'll be absolutely fine. So the next day I didn't go in because I wanted to follow my own advice. I'd always talked about, mental health and well-being. That was, the way that everything was run in the school. And at 8:30 that morning, the second day of inspection, I just had this gut feeling. I always called my school my first baby. And I just thought something's not right. I can just feel something's not right. I had that sixth sense. So I jumped in the car with my baby and drove to school. And the worst ever thing happened. My senior VP, who was stepping in for me at the time, said they're looking to put us in special measures. And again, it was for a very, very slight safeguarding issue that they had found, very similar to what Ruth found with her school. And I was livid. So I literally got to the school. I just gave my baby to reception staff who looked after her. And I went to the conference room and I said, you get me the lead inspector now. How dare you say you're going to put my school in special measures? And for the rest of that day, literally, I was just arguing with the inspectors. And at points, they started saying, oh, actually, behaviour is not good. So I said, well, show me the evidence then that behaviour is not good, because when you walk around the school, everything at the time was absolutely fine. And they were basing that on the evidence of one student who had gone to the inspector to say that some students had said some nasty comments to them. And
that was their evidence.
That was their evidence. Yeah, that was their evidence. And then if you ask them to show you their evidence forms, they won't show them to you. That's their property. They won't show that to you. So as you can imagine, stress levels were extremely high. I was breastfeeding at the time, which is why my baby had to be with me. I was breastfeeding when I could. I had my baby strapped to me when I could, still arguing with the inspectors. There was one point where I wanted to go into a meeting with a colleague of mine who I directly line managed until I went on maternity leave. And literally, I had a hand in my face saying, no, not you. I just want her in the room without you. So I was taken aback
Which is
by that.
exactly what we heard as well, isn't it?
Exactly. So there's so many things that are exactly the same. And I'm not the only person. The only reason why I dare speak up now is because I'm not actually a head teacher or in the teaching profession anymore. I'm doing something that I hope is bigger than that, that I'm going to help other educators not having to go through what I did. So the whole experience was just awful. And then you can imagine when I came back after maternity leave, I was only away for, just under 6 months. Things changed because of the impact of the inspection. Even though we got 3 areas good and 1 area RI, the RI area was quality of education, surprise, surprise. So the overall judgment was RI, requires improvement. So the whole the way the community are afterwards changes. And because of COVID and because we couldn't build those relationships up with the
Yeah.
families
It's
who
hard to
were
get the face
now
to
in the
face. Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
it was just very, very difficult to try and win them back because they just saw the one line requires improvement of the school. So it didn't matter that personal development, behaviour and attitudes, leadership and management were good. They weren't interested in that. They just saw RI. And so therefore it must be, a terrible school. We had lots of families that were very supportive of us, but there's
Yeah.
always that core group that will find any excuse to say, well, you're not doing your job properly.
And
And
they were
just
quick
like
to judge
Ruth,
as well, weren't they? And did you feel they
yeah.
were quick to judge you?
Oh,
And you would feel,
absolutely.
and that,
Absolutely.
and forgive me for this, and you don't have to answer this. Do you think there was a little bit of, not say misogyny, do you think there was a little bit of judging because you're also a mother? Do you think there was a little bit of that coming in as well as hard to, well, you're distracted or you're not doing the, did you feel a little bit of that coming into it possibly as well?
Oh, absolutely. I had a complaint. A parent
No.
actually complained because I went to a parents' evening with my baby because I've got no family here. I come from a different country. I come from Hong Kong, probably the only head from Hong Kong in the whole country here. And she complained to the chair of governors because I brought my baby, who some of the students quite, wanted to look after her for me. But right at the end of the evening, I had my baby with me. And that was when she decided to approach me rather than the rest of the evening. And the complaint came through to say how unprofessional I was to bring my baby to the parents' evening, and this was at 8 o'clock at night or something.
I'm so
So
sorry. It sounds so bad. It's really is. And what upsets me about this, hearing this now, is that you know, yes, you've turned things into a positive with the training. Is absolutely fantastic. But as an educator, you're out of the system, and that's so sad.
Yeah.
All of that
yeah,
accumulated knowledge you had, all everything
The
that
passion, the
yeah,
fire, yeah.
everything that led to that point in your career is gone from the system, and that's so sad.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved my school. Literally, my school was my first baby, and I will still call it that. That was my first baby. I lived and breathed that school. I literally worked all hours of the day to try and do what I could for the community and for the
Yeah.
students of that community. But then after that Ofsted, you just feel that you failed everybody,
Yeah.
exactly how Ruth felt. You feel like you've let people down, you've let the community down. You worry about the house prices as well. Will that come down? And,
You've got
the
all the guilt,
community's
and then
going to
you
have.
know that you know
Yeah,
this
it's
guilt and
that guilt.
shame.
It's that shame.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's the most dangerous thing,
they
which is
are.
why I
Yeah.
wanted to be trauma informed, because there's a lot of people who are feeling exactly the same thing. And I don't want
Yeah.
them to feel the same way I did. So, I ended up in hospital 3 times. I nearly took my own life
Oh,
twice.
bless you.
And that was in less than 8 months. And to try and get the help that you need when you've got a serious mental health issue is so, so difficult at the moment because the services are just so stretched. I was literally trying to find, I knew at the time that I needed a psychiatrist because a few people had mentioned to me, I think you've got PTSD. And I thought, hang on a minute, PTSD, that's what people get if they, fight wars and things. You don't get it from teaching. And certainly nobody
Yeah,
goes into teaching
no.
thinking they're going to get
Yeah.
PTSD. And not only that, it's complex PTSD, it's repeated trauma. But that's what I had. And finally, I managed to get a psychiatrist. I was literally, phoning places and saying, I don't care how much it costs. I just need a psychiatrist. I know that's what I need, because it got so bad that I ended up in hospital 3 times with severe chest pains. So I thought I was having a heart attack. And then the third time I had severe pain to the head as well. So much so that they thought I had bleeding to the brain. So I had CT scans, MRI scans, lumbar puncture, echo heart scans, you name it, I had it. And in the end, it came out that physically there was nothing wrong with me. So it had to be mental. And after a lot of therapy and everything, finally I got the diagnosis of complex PTSD. And I was told it would be at least a 10-month wait before I could have a psychiatrist or even get any sort of therapy. But I don't know what it is. Maybe I was just sending positive vibes, something bigger, the universe, whatever it was looking down on me. And I managed to get a psychiatrist in July. And I managed to get therapy as well, which I'm still having now. And the psychiatric team are working with me to make sure that I'm okay. And thank goodness I'm in a good place at the moment, but they are monitoring me carefully just in case there's relapse. And yeah, I just don't want anybody else to feel like I did. I just want to make sure that everyone's okay. And what we don't want, if we use the analogy of a car, we don't wait for, the wheels to fall off and the engine to go bang before we do something.
Well,
You need to
prevention is
service the
better, isn't
car.
it? And that's the
Exactly.
thing.
I
Going
just want
back
to
to it.
read out a tweet
Yeah.
from Mrs. F because she said, I hear you, Chrissy, about how you feel. We had the same HMI in September 22 as Caversham and ended up RI. The inspection crushed me and still is hard. And I know that other heads in the same scenario feel similar. My heart goes out to Reef's family and community. I remember, it's all a little bit hazy, but I certainly remember reporting on that inspection on TTR at the time, and it's something that stuck with me as well. And it just it sounds as though so many head teachers dotted around the country, or ex-head teachers who had the same experiences, and it may be the same person in the chair, might be a different person in the chair, but it just fit we, and I think Edmund's made this point before on social media, and other people have as well. We can look at individuals, but it's the systems, and it's the systems which have led to the situations we're in.
Yeah. Well, go back, Christy.
Absolutely.
Just one quick question, and the thing is, and I know what the answer is, but the Ofsted you felt was gamed, and they were looking to fail you. Is that what you were also in the same situation as well? With they were finding ways to put you into RI rather than it wasn't fair. Basically, the Ofsted inspection was wrong, unfair, and that they'd gone in there with that agenda. Is that what you were feeling as well?
Yeah, and I keep hearing the same thing from heads of schools that is still local authority maintained. And it just seems like an agenda to get us to join multi-academy trusts. So
So
yeah,
your
like
school
I said,
was
the
local
first day,
authority as well.
local authority as well. The first day went really well, so much so that I was confident enough not to go in on the second day. Now, if I wasn't confident, there is absolutely no way, even though I was a new mum with an 8-week-old baby, that I wouldn't have gone in on the second day. But it was almost like a conversation had been had overnight and the mood completely changed the next day and they were finding fault. And interestingly, they found fault where there were meetings where the teacher was on their own or the senior leader was on their own. So my advice to anybody, if you're going through an inspection, is make sure that you have at least 2 people with you when you are having a meeting with an inspector, so that you've got somebody to back up what you're saying.
That was part of the coroner's recommendations, funnily enough, that staff are literally work in twos. But it's one of those things where logistically that gets impossible in so many schools. You think of a little country school. How on earth are they able to manage this? I think, again, ultimately, it's one of those sort of things where people, men instruct women how to behave at night to mitigate the chances of being attacked. It's like it's like a similar thing. It's like we shouldn't be. It's the wrong mindset. The thing that's wrong is the attack. The thing that's wrong is how the entire philosophy or ethos of the inspection needs to be recalibrated, so that we're not in a position where teachers do have to buddy up in order to have somebody to back them up if there is unacceptable behaviour.
And that comes back to this, really, we come full circle to the culture, because that's what's coming through everything that we've said tonight, is the culture has to change. This hothousing, this aggressive, toxic, culture of out to get you, the fear that they generate, and that prevails right down. And it's almost authoritarian and dictatorial, isn't it? That when you think about political systems, it's like it's some sort of secret police or dictatorial organization that will come, and it's kind of Gestapo-esque, isn't it? And I hate using that, but I'm a historian, so it's I was teaching that today, so that's what's in my mind of kind of like I was teaching about the Nazi takeover in 30s Germany. So it does sort of have her flick of the Gestapo and hello kind of thing going on, of like we're just trying to find fault with you, trying to undermine you, as if it's an organization, and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, there's you that should have been, you're coming into school as a person who cares about, you would judge that and say, there's a head teacher who cares about our community so much so that she's willing to take her 8-week child, and fair play to you. But that does not, what that show you is how committed you are to the school. Look at everything Ruth did over years, how committed they were to the school. But it seems that those type of things don't seem to matter to them. And that's wrong, because those are the things that should really matter the most, is that, as you say, it's your second home. That was your baby. That was your school. And we need people like you. And that's 2 head teachers, not in the system any longer.
Brent, I'm bringing you in Mrs. F, who was inspected by, whose school was inspected by the same HMI as Ruth Perry, Caversham Primary was as well.
Far away, Miss F.
Hi. So lovely to see all of you tonight, virtually, obviously, and then hear what you've been saying. I certainly resonate with what Chrissy was just saying. So we had our inspection in September 22, first possible date we could possibly have, whilst the phone call came in to inform us of the delight. We were actually having a local authority safeguarding audit at the time, so we kind of felt in quite a strong position around, so we thought fantastic. We kind of approached it quite positively. We were vaguely in the window, but we were just a bit shocked, and we're also quite taken aback that we had a section 5 or a graded inspection rather than ungraded. Nevertheless, we welcomed the HMI and the additional inspector and a senior HMI who was shadowing the inspection the next day. All I can say is our experience was like being on an out of control steam train. We had the briefing that kind of went well, and then when he kind of started digging into safeguarding and asking us questions that were confusing, things that we knew that we were standing on 10 foot of concrete with, it was starting to get ridiculous. We were asked to mash an incident where a parent had sworn at a member of staff, and we knew it didn't meet threshold. However, I was sat there with my deputy DSLs thinking, if I don't mash this, then I'm going to be in a category 4 here. And that's how we were made to feel like. There were we mashed it, and they came back saying, well, why have you told us it doesn't meet threshold? But we were kind of fobbed off then by saying, well, they need to know a bigger picture. It was distressing as well, the fact that it was day 6 of the school academic year. The Queen had passed away. We'd obviously commemorated that occasion, and when he heard the readers, now I have to say the readers were on their own, but he was on his own. and he came back and said that the books weren't matched the ability. And I did say, well, it is day 6 of the school academic year. And
they were using evidence of 6 days.
I know. So
no.
Yeah. So and anyway, so I thought, right, okay, fair enough. So at the end of day 1, I kind of asked him whether we were going to be in a category. I said, look, before you go, I need to know, are we going to be a category for safeguarding? And he went, no, you're more likely to be a category for quality of education, and that was due down to the readers. Day 2, I came back with fire in my belly, thinking, right, okay. I mean, there's other things obviously that went on that I won't bore you with, but there were other. Day 2, I came in fire in my belly, and I said, look, I need you to see my school. We are a good school, and I need you to see that. He was like, yeah, okay. And then we then had. I said, I want you to hear more readers, and he went, no, I can't do that. And I said, you can. Having been a previous inspector in the previous framework, I know you can widen your evidence base. I know you look for typicality. And he wasn't prepared to do that at all. So that was quite a bit of a hit as well. So and then we were talking around attendance, and then my DSLs knocked on the door, and we'd had a significant safeguarding issue come in that involved the police. So which then
it's not what you want. It's not what you want during an Ofsted.
No, but it took 4 of us to deal with it, and it took me out of the inspection process. And I have to say, I'm quite a tough cookie. I like to think I am, but it was actually making me stressed. And when I've got the police in my office and an inspector standing outside looking at his watch, or asking me for a hot works permit because we were having some building work done on the roof, so refelting of the roof. I was asked for a hot works permit, and I was like, oh, you can see that I'm dealing with something that's more than what we would normally do on a day-to-day situation. It's a day-to-day operation of the school, and and we obviously went through. We kind of like got through, and when we came to the final team meeting, they were going to give us a 3 for quality of education based on the reading, and I said, that doesn't sound like us. Can we go through the bullet points? And I would recommend anybody in that situation to do the same, because good judgment is around best fit, and because we were just in his opinion, not fulfilling the 2 reading bullet points, then that's 2 out of 16 bullet points, and actually we got good for quality of education out of that. But it was.
But you had to fight for that and contest that.
Absolutely. And following the inspection, and obviously we ended up with an RI judgment because leadership and management was poor due to safeguarding, which our local authority looked at it after and didn't agree with what was said. And supported us.
So that's the same pattern again, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's them failing on safeguarding.
And also,
can I add something to this, which I think it's a recurring theme. Is school leaders have such a burden now, and often these safeguarding issues can be completely outside of their control, because as far as Ofsted are concerned, if you've had for example, a serious case within the school which involved an external agency, so social services, if the paperwork isn't in place that is a requirement of the social services to send back to you, a case is escalated up the line, social services deal with something, they're supposed to send documentation back to show that they've done that. If they haven't sent that documentation, it's on the school as far as Ofsted goes. So the schools are being held to account for not having documentation in place. That's the responsibility of external agencies.
Well, we've got to make sure we've logged that we've chased them. I think that's, as long as we've recorded that we've chased the external agency, then that would be acceptable.
That's good. I mean, I've heard of cases of where that wasn't accepted. And again, it's how the log occurs, because there's this terrible situation with record keeping where they will not give a particular standard or software that they expect to see. So it seems to me completely arbitrary that they can come in and just decide, oh no, your record isn't to our liking, and that's
So,
really
Mr. Seth, you ended up then with the RI. What happened then after that? Did you have what was the response
I was
then?
so angry. I've never been so angry in my professional career before, I have to say. And you can probably hear it now. I'm just so furious that it's been able to happen again. And part of me is thinking, so obviously conversations with the local authority, who've been brilliant, I have to say. They've been absolutely amazing, and support from other colleagues, particularly Flora. She's been absolutely fantastic. I then waited, obviously. No,
Are you going to be part of the revolution? Are you going to be part of the revolution?
A revolution. Well? I'm standing bloody behind Flora at the moment, almost to the side of her. When I'm brave enough, I'll be standing side by side. Bless her. So
I think I'll join you. I'm not a head teacher, but I like revolution.
That's fine. That's fine. So I waited quite nervously for the report to arrive. Because then I could give feedback on the experience, and I was actually quite pleased I could go beyond factual accuracy this time, so you could comment on the factual accuracy and the inspection process as well. So I kind of delivered a 2-page document, which kind of set out what my views were, and also one of them was, around phonics. The HMI didn't feel wondered why we hadn't started year 2 phonics sooner. I said it hadn't been published until September 22, and he kind of like disagreed with me, and then just said, we'll have to agree to disagree. So in that letter I sent him the web link to say it was out September 22, and then
I bet you got some satisfaction.
Well, a little bit, but I think they also mentioned as well around.
But isn't that again? You had to fight for that they wouldn't accept.
I know.
That.
Well, no, they didn't accept that at all. So, and I just kind of was frustrated with that. And then I mentioned around about the significant safeguarding issue. Why didn't anyone come to me to ask whether I wanted the inspection paused or deferred? And I could have asked for that. I acknowledge that I probably could have been adult enough and said, hey, can we do something here? But actually I was in the moment and focusing on looking after the children. The response I had back was, no one came to me to request a pause or deferral to the inspection, therefore I couldn't consider it.
No.
So that then was, unfortunately, I kind of lost faith in the process then, because all human elements of that had just gone.
It's cold. It's cold, isn't it? It's really cold.
So and like you'd like to think, certainly when when inspectors come in, that they do good as they go. So, they do, if head teachers particularly come in, they're doing the job themselves. And I do understand there's got to be some accountability, because we've got public money, we've got the future generation in our hands, and there has to be some form of accountability. But how certainly I've experienced it, and I know other people who've been in a similar situation have experienced it. It's just been absolutely shocking. So I then wondered whether I should put a formal complaint in or not, because I just felt that it wasn't right. In the end, after a lot of deliberation, because you only have 7 days to get back with a draft report or a formal complaint.
That's right.
I decided not to in the end. I am, for Ruth's sake, I have to say, really wishing I had, because if I had, would it have stopped him from going to her school?
The thing is, you can feel as if you feel bad that you didn't, and you probably think to yourself, why didn't I fight more? But you're thinking about other people as well. It's that culture. It's that culture of it'd be worse, isn't it? And if I make this any worse, it's going to get. So I completely understand that. You can't blame yourself for that, because
from my perspective as well, is that I wasn't standing on 10 foot of concrete as to whether his evidence base was going to be supportive of quality of education going into a 3. And I know there were 2 other inspectors, there as well, who would have different evidence bases as well. But for me and my school community, most importantly for my children, I didn't want the report to look or read any worse than what it was. So if I knew it was going to be either the same or better, then wild horses wouldn't have stopped me.
It's that consequences for other people, and then what you framed there is exactly what comes through in Ruth's notes. Is the responsibility, the consequences are on you. These are the decisions you have to make, and you've got to live with them. And a colleague of mine, who a deputy head teacher, once said, "It's a lonely walk of leadership." Yes, you've got people around you, but ultimately, it's your name on that report. It's your name on the school, and as heavy wears the crown, and that is a difficult thing, and that's why it's such a difficult job being a head teacher, and that's why you guys deserve all the respect, and that's why we're losing 9% of our head teachers, because it's such a hard, difficult job, being second guessed all the time in every decision. And this lack of support, you shouldn't have to be in that situation where you're contesting an Ofsted that was hostile and aggressive. It should have been an experience where you felt either vindicated, supported, and walk away with some advice to make your school even better, rather than this aggressive, toxic thing. So thanks for that. That's really. I think we're going to read it out. We're going to keep going. If people still want to keep going.
Just to interject, but this show is brought to you in partnership with John Cat Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324. That's JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading. Just for clarity, I found the thread that we posted about the requires improvement judgment there that you just heard about, and that's pinned to the top of the space. We've got some more speakers in for you. Brent Edmund is still here. It is 10:07, and Edmund might have news at 10 on in the background. Questions.
I do. I've got it muted, so don't worry. I'm happy to carry on.
We've also
I'm actually honestly feeling. I'm genuinely feeling benefit from this. It's I don't know why. It feels slight catharsis, because I've not. Yes, obviously I've been tweeting, but I've not been responding to human beings over what's been happening.
Well, you've been in the eye of the storm, really, haven't you? You've been sort of focused in, and this is the reaction of people around. This is the reaction of our profession. This is the reaction of head teachers. We're hearing the same story repeated. This is the reaction of us in the wider teaching community to it, and obviously it's good for you to hear that the connections and the good that you've done, the good that has come out of this thing, this David and Goliath. Again, it goes down to that. The truth has come out, and that wasn't an easy thing to get to, and that mirrors, doesn't it, a lot of these Ofsted reports where people had to fight and fight and fight. And we shouldn't have this system where we have to stand up and fight, because we're there to educate, and we're there doing a good job. We're there trying the best for our children. Let's bring in, have we got Tracy Bolton?
Hi, thanks for having me. I may be reiterating some points that have been said earlier. I didn't join at the very beginning, and obviously my thoughts and prayers are with Ruth's family and friends. And I've cried a number of times this week reading what's been coming out about this, and the tragedy of it and how horrific it is. And we thought, how bad would this have to get? And actually somebody has taken their own life as a result of this, which is, as I've said, horrific. I applaud Christy and the other speakers that you've had on this evening for their resilience and, their tenacity. But for my thinking, Ofsted as an organisation is bloated. It's bloated and it's distorted beyond its useful purpose now, and it no longer acts as a force for good in improving schools, and hasn't done for quite some time. And I think we all agree, perhaps, that when it exerts such pressure, fear and anxiety on us as school leaders, then nobody works at their best under those sort of conditions. We all know we've got a paucity of teachers entering the profession, let alone anybody who's considering headships. You know, I know of a number of schools who are trying to recruit heads and finding it extremely challenging because of the, you know, the pressures that are around the job.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, just in tonight, we've heard a number of stories. Nationally, how many stories are there out there? And there is, it seems to resonate a little bit with me around, you know, it's kind of like the Me Too, you know, not about a person, but about an organization. We're talking about reactionary things, about needing therapy and trauma counseling, and, you know, colleagues being diagnosed with PTSD and with serious mental conditions for running schools. And this has become, it's we've got to a situation of insanity, really. And it's just, you know, as professionals, this is the time. I mean, it's very much like, you know, Flora's been saying, what action do we take now? Because we do need to take action now, because the regulatory body is not going to regulate itself. And that's
No,
very
and that's what this
clear and
proves, doesn't it? We
evident.
have to fight,
Yeah.
don't we? We have to stand up. We have to fight. We
It's
have
very,
to.
very clear and
Yeah.
evident that then
Yeah.
they are not going to do that. And there will be no school leaders, because, you know, nobody wants to work under that sort of pressure and intensity. I've been a school head. I'm still in education, but no longer in headship, but fully conversant of the pressures and the heavy load that is carried by school heads in that role. And I just think we have to be united in this. There has to be some sort of national campaign that we organise as school leaders to say that we're just not going to tolerate it anymore.
I think there's one group of people missing from this equation, and it was mentioned earlier on about, you know, the criticism from some parents. I think we really need the support now of the wider communities of the schools. I think we need our parents to rally round, support, and that's the narrative. Too many of the general public have bought into the criticism narrative as well. We hear that as well, don't we? About, well, you know, the head teacher has failed. You know, these teachers have failed. My children have been failed by the schools, and yet we are doing our best. So there has to be some, how do I say it, responsibility borne by those quick to criticize schools, not quick to support. And I don't always agree with it, but there was one thing that Spielman did say about the connection, the social contract between schools and some parents is kind of being eroded and broken a little bit. And I think she had a point there that does seem to be all or nothing on, a bit like the CEO of a company, isn't it? When the company's not making profits, the CEO gets sacked, or the football manager gets sacked if the team's not, you know, top of the league. There does seem to be that kind of agenda, doesn't it? Of you're the leader, you're responsible, and everybody points the finger. And the local community then, and we were saying that as well, some of the local communities then, you have the guilt and the shame of you're the head teacher of a school that has failed us, and that has to change. But we need, how do we get through? How do we cut through to the wider general public for them to help and support as well? Almost like, you know, we've seen that with Caversham and leave our community alone. I mean, but not every community has that, and I don't know how we do that, how we reconnect to build up that layers of people who are willing to stand up, and because that's what it has to be. Anytime there's been changes, it's always a large group of people that makes the change. It has to be the general public. We need the public support, don't we?
And it's about the humanity, I think, as well, because we're all people first. Yeah. You know, we do our jobs because we love them. You know, we're passionate about, you know, our schools and our children, and wanting to make a difference, and wanting and believing that, you know, that's something that is so wonderful, and, you know, the privilege of being able to do that. And I've never met anybody who goes into work and, you know, says, oh, I'm going to do a really bad job today. You know, everybody goes in and tries their absolute best. But we are people first. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten when in the narrative and the rhetoric that goes around, you know, teachers and head teachers. So, yeah, it's reclaiming our profession. It's reclaiming our profession and reclaiming our status really within society, that we are doing our best for our children, for everybody's children, for the future generation, and, like you say, bringing people on board with that.
It is, isn't it?
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. You're more than welcome. Absolutely more than welcome. I'm gonna pretty much, I think we can start wrapping up unless anybody else would like to.
We've got Julie, who former HMI, who's
We've
on the
spoken to
line
Julie
as
before.
well. And
Fire
we've
away,
got
Julie.
the thing I wanted to say as well, Brent, is just how many head teachers we have. Head teachers who have either been speakers or have been listening as part of our huge audience tonight.
Yeah.
Head teachers and former head teachers, and just how resonant not only Ruth Perry's story, but the stories that have been shared from other head teachers have been with so many head teachers, and it is such a lonely profession. And Brent and I, we're teachers, but we've never held. I'm not sure. Brent, you've been a head of department. Have you been a head of department?
I'm a current head of department.
Head of department,
governor
but
as
never
well.
a senior.
Yeah.
It's never a senior leader. I've never been more than a TLR holder, and we don't know what it's like to hold. To be in that chair, and neither do a lot of Ofsted inspectors either at the moment. And so, to hear these stories, and it's been really powerful, and humbling to a large extent.
Yeah.
Salute you all, every one of the heads that's out there listening. I am utterly in awe of the work you do, and you can't underestimate the value that has. It's one of those things. This whole process for me of defending Ruth and Ruth's legacy is based around fully understanding her qualities, not only as a teacher, but as a person, but as a head, I've never had to have any concern about my kids at school. I know that whatever problem they had, that school would address that problem and help them to the best ability. And yeah, I mean, I love the school, I love the head, I love the current acting heads. They're amazing people. I shall see them tomorrow at coffee morning, and I know they'll be just as they always are. And as I'm saying this, I'm seeing myself on TV, which is very weird.
Yes, it is. I'm going to bring you can pop off, have a look at your seat, television, and then pop back a second. So I'm going to bring Julie in, and she's the school development advisor and a former HMI. And we have, are you there, Julie?
I am,
sorry.
yes, I'm here.
What's a Gaelic learner? Is that Scottish Gaelic?
Yes, it's Scottish Gaelic. Yeah.
Kajema Tatu.
Yeah. I was going to say Fescama, but that's probably my limit for this particular conversation. So Fescama, everybody. But it's been it's been a very, very mixed day for me. What I am going to say is that I work. A lot of people know I work for an organisation called Headrest, which is a fabulous organisation, and head teachers can contact Headrest if they, for any reason, if they want support, they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, they want advice. There are a group of fabulous people there. Now, I get anything that is related to Ofsted. So if somebody's had a nightmare inspection, they don't know what to do, they come through to me. And what happened was there was a big increase in the number of calls that I got in the autumn term 21, which was the term that Ofsted started inspecting again in earnest after the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Now, they were nearly all the calls were from primary schools where inspectors were going in saying, why hasn't your geography subject leader got a degree in geography, and why aren't they an expert in the Cuban Missile Crisis if they're a history leader? And they were saying ridiculous things to primary school leaders who were just back after a pandemic. So we got a lot of calls in that term. I got a lot of calls in that term. Then it went fairly quiet, and then in March, after Ruth's story broke, it started to get more, it started to really pick up, and I started to get a lot more queries. And the sort of things I'm doing, talking people through what happened during the inspection, telling them that sadly they are not uncommon, that lots of people are experiencing these things, and then talking them through the complaints process if they want to complain. Obviously, you know, I'm not there to force anyone to complain, but if they want to do it, I will talk them through that, and sometimes it's a good thing for them to do. Now, what's extraordinary is it has since March got more and more and more. And the really strange thing is, in the last week since the inquest started, it's gone crazy. So I've had 4 this week. I had 3 on Tuesday. I had 3 heads in tears, in an absolute state, saying, this is the worst thing that's happened to me in my life. I don't know if I can go on. That's 3 in one day.
And I suppose then, Julie, the question will be...
Yeah.
Oh, go on, Brent.
Yeah, so the thing is, the former HMI, so we'll stick to the HMI. So as a former HMI, compared to when were you HMI 10, when were you the HMI, and compare, what was the comparison of the HMI now to being what's happening now to what you were as the HMI, if that makes sense. So could you sort of tell me then when we were HMI, and then the change that has happened, that obviously in the last couple of weeks you've seen more traffic coming in. So what has been the change? When do you think the change happened? What's actually happened to Ofsted really is what I really like to know from somebody who's worked for Ofsted. What's happened to them? Where have they gone wrong?
I'm putting together a piece, you know, I'm writing a big piece about this, because looking back on it, I mean, I started inspecting in 2001, and in those days it was when schools got, you know, 2 terms notice and decorated the school, and they knew the dates everyone was coming in, and the inspectors were in for a week. And although it was a nightmare, because I was on the receiving end of that as well, in some ways it was a nightmare, but you tended to get specialists, and everybody said, well, we had good conversations with our inspectors, and you know, it although it was rubbish in some ways, there was some advantages. Now, 2005, Ofsted moved to the 2-day framework, Section 5 framework, and initially it was okay, and it sort of went on. And I finished inspecting in 2014, but over time, because what we were told was, what you can't do is you can't fit 5 days inspection into 2 days. So don't even try. That's going to cause problems. Now, that's exactly what's happened. Over time, it's got worse. But I would say the turning point is when the stakes got raised to, if you are inadequate, you will be under new management. You will become an academy if you're not already an academy. And if you are already an academy, you will probably be rebrokered. And that's the thing that made the difference. That was the thing that raised the stakes.
So it's the raising, and then the strong arm forcing of schools into multi-academy trusts, which then generated this fear culture of, we have to get good to protect ourselves, to stay under local authority control. But slowly but surely, as schools went through this new system, they started to get... and I've always thought this, were schools rated badly, then all of a sudden taken over by a new organisation, re-inspected, and Bob's your uncle. Hey, we're okay.
Well, yeah, it's actually quite bizarre, because when I was inspecting schools, if a school did get inadequate, and I have to say not many did, I was involved in over 200 inspections, really not that many got special measures. But if they did, what would happen was they would be assigned an HMI who'd go in every term and help them and advise them and support them through it. And they had up to 2 years. Though these people would
almost mentor them, wouldn't they? They would mentor the school, wouldn't they?
Exactly, yeah. And it was a great relationship. Now, what happens now is you're inadequate. It's often forced academisation, and Ofsted don't go near you for 3 years. So that's part of the problem. But there's 2 things I just want to raise here, because they're really important. And for all the people listening, I think this is really important. The first one is that the Ofsted complaints process is absolutely shocking. So the Ofsted complaints process is summed up like this. You complain, you can say that, you know, these are my concerns about the judgment, these are my concerns about the conduct of the inspector. What you will get back, pretty much regardless of what you're saying, is a document that says, we have looked through the inspectors evidence-based, and they say that they are right and you are wrong. So, that's the end of it. If you complain about conduct, you get a standard paragraph. I've actually posted it on Twitter today that says, yeah, we're going to pass your concerns to the inspector's business manager. No further communication is necessary. They don't do investigation. They just shut it down. That is unacceptable. We're having inspectors going into schools doing and saying outrageous things, and there is no comeback at all.
So what you're really saying is they're held to hold schools accountable, but they themselves aren't really accountable.
Not at all. Absolutely not. And you have to push and push. And I mean, judicial review. Judicial review is really if Ofsted doesn't follow its own procedures. It's expensive. It's often successful to an extent, but schools don't want to be spending, £50,000
not with their budgets, but
£100,000.
also, like we heard earlier on, do they really want to take the risk of it being even worse, and thus the fear culture of getting the ire of Ofsted? Should they come after you even more, you could go from an RI down to even worse. There's that aspect as well of the culture of challenging isn't there. The idea you can challenge them is not really there, because there is that fear culture of this could get even worse for us, couldn't it, really?
Yeah, that the fear culture is crazy, and it's the main reason people don't complain during an actual inspection. So as somebody said the other day on Twitter, it was a good way of putting it. Really, was if you've got to go to a lead inspector and your complaint is about them, and you're expected to go to them on the day, it's a bit like a gazelle saying to a lion, I'm not very happy about the fact you're about to eat me. Can we talk about this? It's good just analogy. Nonsense. Well, nobody's gonna do that. But actually, the stats say that schools that are assertive, Ofsted tend not to take it out on them if they go back. That's what the stats are saying. So we need people to know about how awful the complaints process is, because that's got to be changed. The other thing we need to know, and a few people have touched on this tonight, is I've had some people tonight who clearly, they're just some of them are sort of on the verge of trolling, but they're saying this is safeguarding. You're saying that it's okay for my child to be unsafe. No, we're really not saying that. And I'm going into schools that got inadequate for safeguarding. And it is things like, there was one case, the case I'm going to give, because it very nearly destroyed that head teacher. It's a head teacher I'm now working with. The inspector said, I don't like the fact that you're using my concern. Why aren't you using CPOMs? I'm not happy with the software you're using. And what's this case on here? And the head teacher said, yes, that case went to social services, and social services have closed the case. And the inspector said, that's disgraceful. It's your responsibility to get them to reopen that case. And you're going down for this. You're going into inadequate for this. And that's what they did. Yeah. And
but here's the thing, isn't it? Measures. And here's the rub. The rub is this, is that ironically, sometimes Ofsted may be correct. And that's the problem is that they may be able to pull up sometimes on some safeguarding issues. We need them. We do need them to go in and to actually honestly do their job. The problem is, once you've started to lose faith in an organization, once you've seen so many errors, it's very hard to trust. And that's the thing about it, is you've got to trust that this organization hasn't got an agenda. You have to trust this organization's got the best interests. And what we're saying tonight is that we don't have trust in Ofsted, and we do need some way, because they are doing a job. We need to make sure that there is some sort of accountability and checks and balances, because that's what it is. It's checks and balances. Schools need checks and balances, which they used to have under local authority control. I used to be part of a governing body of 20 teachers plus and all sorts of parents, and we used to have a large amount of parent governors. Now I see there's less accountability on the likes of academisation, and yet you've got Ofsted who are dictating to people with no accountability. So weirdly, there's more accountability on schools, but less accountability on the people who are holding schools accountable. And yet we need them to be accountable in the same way that we're accountable. But as we found out, they don't like that. They don't like to be challenged. They don't want to be challenged. So it's an imbalance. And I think that's what came out of the coroner's report was there's a massive power imbalance between the schools, the Ofsted and the local authorities. And we can't have that because they have to do their job, don't we? We need them to sometimes find schools that aren't doing what they should be doing. But how can we trust that?
I don't think anybody thinks there shouldn't be accountability. That's the thing. I've never met a teacher that ever thought there shouldn't be accountability. It's literally how that system is worked out, though. But interestingly, that gazelle analogy,
it's a good one.
The one that I like, which I nicked from The Darkest Hour, and I actually used in a meeting on Gillian Keegan, was that you cannot negotiate with a tiger when your head is in its mouth.
Yes.
And that's the same concept. And that's that idea that people are that teachers are supposed to push back against the thing that is antagonizing them and complain to the antagonist that they're antagonizing them, which is just
absolutely
crazy.
I've just got to bring in, thank you, our Gurma Yoga, Julie, thank you. I'm just going to bring in Joanna. I've got Joanna here, and she's, yeah.
Brent, before we do that,
yeah,
we've probably only got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little bit of time for reflections at the end, and another word from John Catt, our sponsors for tonight. And yeah, we can have a couple of minutes. Actually, I think we might have to skip Joanna. Very sorry, Joanna, but we might not have enough time for you tonight, which is a shame because she was waiting patiently.
I'll give her 2 minutes.
No, I think we're going to have to wrap it up, Brent.
You sure? Okay, fair enough then. Sorry, Joanna, and again, thank you, Edmund. You are an absolute legend. It's a pleasure to speak to you. I was expecting 10 minutes with you, not you sharing you with the sky tonight.
Sorry, that's me. That's my fault. But thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm honoured to be here. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome, and as I say, from the teaching fraternity, thank you for all you've done as well. And again, Julia, those who have campaigned, everybody who's stood up as well, everybody who's made that stand, everybody who's supported, the crowdfunding, because it can't be underestimated. It has been a David and Goliath, wasn't it? It was a David and Goliath, wasn't it?
All those people that gave, it was just so. I mean, the comments. You only have to go to the page and look at the comments. Are just so amazing. People are so amazing. The support has been so amazing. We felt that every single day in that court. We felt the hands of other people on our shoulders giving us support. It really has been amazing.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad we've been able to support and keep supporting as well, because it's not done, is it? It's not done at all. This is the first stage, really, of getting the change that we all really want, and the change that we want, and the legacy, and hopefully that legacy will be that Ruth is that canary in the coal mine that makes that change. And I think your point is correct about possibly the new system coming in with the new Ofsted inspector is a fresh start and a perfect opportunity. But certainly we won't at Teachers Talk Radio, as I know Tom, our director, is always and always been on this, because it is because we care. We really want the best for the kids, and we care about teachers. That's what Teachers Talk Radio is about. And if anybody's been listening tonight and wants to come and join the hive mind that is Teachers Talk Radio, we are only teachers. We're spread out across the country and even far afield as well. Some of us have started off just by calling into one of these shows like this, and then obviously realised this is really good CPD and a good opportunity to talk to people like Edmund, and because we care about our profession, and that's what it is standing up for people in our profession, standing up for the kids that we have, and our education needs that advocacy as well. So we are sponsored by John Catt Education. It's coming up to Christmas. It's a really good opportunity to get one of their fantastic books. They've got plenty of good stuff about especially well-being, because tonight has been about obviously supporting each other, but obviously well-being as well. They do professional books and resources for schools around the world, and we have a code. If you want to use the code, it's for 20% off. It's GSE TT or 2324. So JCTTR 2324, and you'll find them at johncatbookshop.com, and they're absolutely fantastic organisation as well, and we're really, really glad that they sponsor us. A massive shout out to everybody who spoke tonight: Chrissy, Edmund, obviously, we had Julia, Julie, sorry, we've so many individuals there tonight, so many great stories. It's been an emotional, really is emotional. I think I've earned my Teachers Talk Radio mug tonight with 3 hours. It's been a pleasure to do this, and it's been hard to do this, but at the same time, I will walk away from it feeling uplifted that we have so many great head teachers out there. And again, I'd like to say that our head teacher fraternities, I am somebody who's a union rep who doesn't like authority, but I have nothing but, especially after COVID, the most honest respect for any head teachers currently in our system, because I've seen the other side of it and I see what you do. And not everybody appreciates the job that you do. It's a difficult job because you're always second guessed, and everybody doesn't always know what's going on behind the scenes. When you pull back that curtain and you see all the things that the head teachers do, I think it's a thankless job, and I'd like to say thank you to you, because it is such a hard job, and we need more people to stay in the teaching profession, and that's got to be the outcome after all of this, is that we need the head teaching profession to be supported, and we need no more situations like this ever happening again, because the whole lessons learned isn't good enough. It's got to change, hasn't it? So thank you to everybody tonight. Thank you to my admin support. Anything to say, admin support? Are we happy?
We're very happy, Brent. It's been over 3 hours of content, and at the start of the show, when I introduced everybody, I said it would be a very somber and solemn 90 minutes, but it's been double that, and it's been led expertly by you, Brent. And yeah, there's a lot for us all to reflect on tonight, I think, about the future of the inspectorate, the future of inspection in this country, about how senior figures in Ofsted have responded to the death of Ruth Perry, and of course the conclusions made by the coroner into the inquest into Ruth Perry's death, in that unequivocally Ofsted had a role to play.
And it's for me to say good night and good luck in the 5-period day I have tomorrow. It's going to be a video day tomorrow.
I was meant to do my mock marking tonight. It never happened.
Oh gosh, God, I'll get that done before Christmas.
Day to deadline tomorrow, end of the day tomorrow. Can't wait. Ooh.
Yeah, well, it's the weekend coming up.
We are
Good night,
teachers,
everybody.
and that's who we are at Teachers Talk Radio. We're not, we are. Brent teaches a full-time table. I teach a full-time table. That is who we are. So yeah, good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.